Chapter 866. Qin Mo lowered his body, his black hair still damp from the rain. His fingers landed on the seatbelt. Bojiu didn't think that the Almighty would let her off just like that. But even though she was prepared, Bojiu didn't expect that after the seatbelt was unfastened, his long and beautiful fingers didn't leave. Instead, they moved down her waist and landed on her chest. Bojiu raised her hand, arching a brow. "Brother Mo, what are you trying to do?" Bojiu watched as the person in front of her glanced at her collar calmly, a faint smile on his lips. "It seems like you were serious when you asked me to hold it back then." "Why? Aren't you going to hold my hand and let me check its elasticity?" Dark history. Bojiu felt that ever since she knew the Almighty, every memory was a dark history. He didn't give the youngster any time to react since this time, Qin Mo was serious. He reached out and blocked the narrow car door, his left hand reaching under the hem of her shirt to remove the cloth. His movements were so fast that even before she could resist, she was already at a disadvantage. Her back was facing Qin Mo and one of her hands was cuffed, limiting her range of movement. The Almighty was formidable. Knowing that she was good with her legs, he decided to stay in the car. "I'm more interested in your body structure than your reason for dressing up as a man." Qin Mo looked at the person in his arms. His ink-black eyes were tainted with a deep darkness. He pressed his body over and pressed his lips against the back of her fair and elongated neck. His deep voice caused the temperature in the car to rise to the extreme. Bojiu straightened her back, not wanting to expose any weakness at this moment. Qin Mo chuckled, his slightly cold lips moving upwards, landing on the tip of her ear. "Just as you wish, let's try it out." "Brother Mo, I thought we were going to have a good talk." Bojiu wanted to move her wrists, but they were cuffed. She wanted to move her right leg, but it was pressed down. Qin Mo arched a brow, his face reflected in the car window, making him look noble. Even with her back facing him, Bojiu could see his face. His black and sharp hair, his handsome and robust body made him look like a devil in the night, extremely dangerous. "All the time, isn't it?" He smiled and flicked his finger. His breath landed behind her. "Why? You don't like this method?" An electrifying heat surged through her body at the contact. Bojiu trembled uncontrollably. His body temperature seemed to have started to go out of control along with the temperature in the car. However, that voice didn't seem to have any intention of leaving her ears. His cold fingers wandered wantonly on her smooth skin. Then, he gripped her tightly. "It's really soft and feels good. It's so realistic that not only can it fool some otakus, it can even fool me." This time, Qin Mo's smile was a little cold. "Smart. Why does this sound so familiar?" When she thought about it carefully, she realized that those were her own words. The Almighty's ability to hold a grudge was too good. Bojiu seized the last chance to get up. "I can explain." Qin Mo pressed her back down, his breath thickening. His fingers didn't have the slightest intention of withdrawing. The softness under his palms still carried the delicate fragrance of jade that made his body heat up every time he thought about it. She felt that at this time. Chapter 867. But it's not suitable here. Qin Mo pressed his forehead against the back of the youngster's head, putting up a final resistance. The sweat on his forehead flowed from his well-defined chin to his neck, which was already burning hot. "At least there's a bed, that would make you more comfortable. Even though it's safer here, I can't bear to torment you for an entire night." With that, Qin Mo had already stood up and unlocked the car. Bojiu's eyes were burning with passion. By the time she realized what was going on, she had already been carried horizontally. Qin Mo passed her his jacket. His long legs were straightened. Beneath the white shirt, his body was tall and fit. The raindrops fell on his hair, but it didn't affect his elegance at all. Madame Zhang watched as her young master carried her in. She wanted to follow, but when she saw Qin Mo's side profile, she retreated silently. The wall lamp was switched on, the light was dim. The second she was thrown onto the bed, the light was dim. The moment she was pushed onto the bed, the jacket was pulled open, the shirt was soft and thin, sticking to her body. The hand that was pressing down on her palm made her unable to move at all. The glass window wasn't closed, the wind blew in, lifting the white curtain. Chin Mo didn't give her a chance to escape. The white shirt was half open, the hem rolled up, revealing the youngster's waist. Her skin was fair and slender, just as he had imagined countless times. It was extremely flexible to the touch, and as she twisted, the curve of her waist was even more shocking and alluring. Chin Mo chuckled, landing on one knee on the bed, one hand holding onto her chin, the tip of his tongue entering, twisting and sucking. No one would be able to withstand such a kiss. His hand was still moving downwards, needing the most vulnerable spot. Bojo wasn't Chin Mo's match in this aspect. Her eyes were misty, she couldn't help but let out a low moan. Chin Mo's entire body went numb, the strings of his rationality snapped. He reached out to separate her legs. He had never wanted someone as much as he did at this moment. His heart was beating like a drum, his soul was drifting. Especially when he saw the youngster frowning slightly, her body trembling slightly. He wanted to possess her completely. So much so that his predatory nature was completely revealed. Especially when he saw the youngster lying on his bed. Her clothes were still on, her black hair messy, and her left hand was still cuffed. Her body was as clear and cool as a bright jade, faintly outlining her abstinence. Such abstinence stimulated Chin Mo. It was as if he was being sucked into a whirlpool, unable to resist. Looking into those eyes, Bojo knew there was no way she could escape today. As his long legs rubbed against each other, he couldn't find any point of resistance. His body was still terrifyingly numb. Bojo knew what the Almighty was planning. She bit her lips, her consciousness blurry. All the sensations in her body seemed to come from the series of numbness. Only one thing was clear. The knife that was hidden somewhere could not be used. That would hurt the Almighty's hand. Thinking about it carefully, it was just having sex. If after this, she could have a child that belonged to her and the Almighty when she left, it was not necessarily a bad thing. After having this idea, Bojo turned the tables, pressing his hand down. I don't like to be passive. Chapter 868. Before Bojo could fully comprehend the meaning of his words, Chin Mo had already carried her. Chin Mo had already hugged her, and the two of them switched positions. At this moment, Chin Mo was below her. His shirt was half open. His chest was faintly glowing. The lines were smooth and tight. It was tough and captivating. Bojo sat on Chin Mo's sturdy waist. She watched the man who could bring chaos to the world. He held her waist with one hand, his gaze like a broken black diamond. When he looked at her again, the coldness and sharpness had settled into the depth of the moon. It was as though he could suck her whole body in. There was a kind of man who was so handsome that anyone who saw him would be tempted. Regardless of gender. If he was willing. Previously, Bojo had a taste of the Almighty's ability to seduce people. She had thought that was his limit. What she didn't know was that when he took off his black trousers and laid there with his clothes completely unbuttoned, the masculine charm that erupted from him was really inescapable. Especially when the sweat flowed down his chiseled face, past his chin and stopped at his collarbone. Probably anyone would want to lay their hands on him. Bojo was no exception. She had always told him what she liked since she was young. That was why she had wanted to use her little keyboard to exchange for her pet the first time she had met him. In the end, he had complained that her keyboard was too old and didn't want her money. She had been depressed for a long time because of this. Every day, she would climb through the window and watch as he read. He would feed her impatiently, his little face cold. He had even warned her, "You can come but you can't dirty my book." She had indeed run around and her body was dirty. But a child should have some innocence. Besides, as the boss of a district, how could she not display her dominance? But since her pet had said so. Before she went, she would wipe her face clean. She had to bring a gift when she was a guest. This was the Bo family's teachings. But every time, he wasn't interested in the things she brought. Later, for some unknown reason, her canine pet became interested in her electronic devices. After washing her hands, he dismantled the Overlord game console that she liked. Then, she received a small drone. She liked this person. She liked it too much. She had to hesitate. His identity wasn't suitable. If the Almighty wasn't a criminal psychologist. If the Almighty was just a second-rate criminal psychologist. There was probably no such thing as being reluctant to part with him. She wouldn't fall in love with him anyway. It was because he was neither. Before meeting the Almighty, Bojo didn't think there was such a person. It was pure and powerful like a light that was not affected by the darkness. That was why she wanted it so badly, but she was worried that her identity would be exposed. He would treat her coldly. After all, it wasn't just him, even she was very clear about this. Those who walk different paths cannot make plans together. She belongs to the night. And he should always be in existence standing on the altar. However, she had also said that if the Almighty kissed her again, she took him away and raised him. Even if he didn't carry her away, he had to sleep with her once. Thinking of this, Bojo smiled and lowered her head. Her face was extremely handsome. Brother Mo, I gave you a chance to reconsider. Chapter 869. In that instant, the gentleness in the bathroom seemed to have been sucked away. All the warmth came to an abrupt end. Chin Mo froze. Even his long fingers that were hugging the person in his arms tightened. Chin Mo lowered his lids, sweeping a glance at her face. His lips were pressed into a thin line, his brows thick and his nose high. His beautiful eyes were like a whirlpool, without a hint of emotion. His gaze was cold enough to tell how he was feeling right now. Anyone familiar with Chin Mo would know that he had always been elegant and polite. Even when he was in a fight, he would always smile. But now, the murderous aura rising from his body made it so no one dared to approach him. It was still drizzling outside the window. Chin Mo placed the person in the blanket, the room turning cold. Bojo wasn't fully awake. In her blurry state, she seemed to hear someone asking her, "Why did you leave?" It was a low and moist voice, hoarse. Bojo was exhausted, falling into a deeper sleep. The night sky darkened. Princess, who was curled up on the glass balcony, was unusually quiet today. It wasn't because of anything else but because it didn't dare to create a ruckus. After today, it finally understood one thing. In the past, it had always thought that it was impossible for that fellow to lay a finger on its master. But now, it seemed like the other party was too strong. Its master hadn't been able to resist even when she was pinned down. Sigh, as a cat, there was nothing it could do about it. It was already so late but there were still sounds coming from the kitchen. Madame Zhang would definitely wake up. But when she saw the tall and slender figure in the kitchen, she was stunned. She wasn't sure what her young master was thinking. His eyes were dark and deep, as though they were a bottomless abyss. Madame Zhang walked over. "Young master, let me do it." Chin Mo shook his head. He was cooking noodles in a pot to ensure it wouldn't turn cold. He carried it upstairs with one hand. Madame Zhang watched from the back, hesitating if she should tell Madame that her young master had brought young Master Jiu home today. Even Auntie Zhang could tell that today was different. Chin Mo rarely cooked, so he wasn't hungry. He knew clearly who the noodles were for. He looked at the person lying on his bed. Her black hair hung down and covered her face, revealing only her chin. Her sleeping appearance was very pleasing to the eye. But Chin Mo's narrow and dangerous eyes narrowed. He chuckled coldly. "You haven't learned your lesson." As soon as he finished speaking, he leaned forward. While he was half asleep, he was forced into a state of ferocity and numbness. He was unable to extricate himself, and even his toes were trembling. Bojo felt as though she was in a furnace. She exerted force on her fingers and couldn't help but let out a sound. When she opened her eyes, they were blurry and misty. It was supposed to be a punishment, but at this moment, Chin-mo felt as though he was about to melt in it. When he met her gaze again, he couldn't take it anymore. He grabbed her waist and rained down on her. The white window screen was blown up, and even the lingering scene gave people an extremely beautiful and dreamy feeling. The sky was bright. After the rain, the sky in Rivertown was very blue. The sun shone down from the east, speckling the bed. Chapter 870. She tilted her head and woke up for real. Her entire body was sore, especially her legs. But it couldn't compare to the lingering redness on her neck. Bojo's eyes dimmed. Her first reaction was to look at her chest. It was an obvious mark, but fortunately, he had taken care of it. If not, yesterday's situation, the moment she thought about it, Bojo's ears turned red. It was better not to think about it. Bojo arched a brow. Her skin was fair and she wasn't wearing a top. When she sat up, the sunlight seeped in, scattering the blankets like snow. She looked extremely beautiful, but the cold and lazy aura was still there, like the snow that had been covered in dust for a long time. She didn't get off the bed immediately. Instead, she wrapped herself in the blankets. Coincidentally, her eyes met Princess's glassy eyes. She couldn't resist the urge, grabbing the cat over and squeezing its paws. When Chin-mo pushed the door open, this was the scene he saw. His gaze was as deep as the night. Be it the bed, the person, or the cat, they all belonged to him. He didn't want to let go of any of them. Bojo glanced up when she heard the noise. When she saw who it was, she restrained her hands. Honestly, the Almighty was the person Bojo didn't want to see the most right now. Mainly because her motive for sleeping with him wasn't pure. But Bojo had an evil and cunning personality. She wouldn't be able to do it no matter how shy she was. Hence, she took the initiative. Brother Mo, do you have anything to eat? Chin-mo arched a brow. She wasn't shy at all. He reached for the bowl on the side of the table and lifted the lid. The fragrance of the pork bones seeped out. Chopped green onions were placed on the noodles. The bones were soft and looked good. Just from the looks of it, it wouldn't taste bad. The only thing that made Bojo feel awkward was the fact that the Almighty had fed her personally. When their eyes met, it was inevitable for her to avoid his gaze. But she knew that the Almighty loved cleanliness. When she slurped the noodles, she was rather serious and didn't drip any soup. If the Almighty hadn't said faintly, "It's my first time." Bojo paused. What did he mean? Chin-mo watched her, his expression nonchalant and noble. Since you slept with me, you have to take responsibility. What do you think? Slurp. Bojo swallowed the noodles, instantly realizing that this was a trap. She couldn't help but remind the Almighty, Brother Mo, girls are at a disadvantage in such matters. Really? Chin-mo opened his official Weibo and found a Weibo topic that many people had reposted. The topic was, which Almighty in the esports industry do you want to sleep with? Without a doubt, Chin-mo was at the top of the rankings. Spade Z came from behind, and even though he had a good momentum, he was only ranked third. Who do you think is at a disadvantage now? Chin-mo played with the lighter in his hand. His black hair fell down and he smiled slightly. Bojo looked at the data. For the first time in her life, she had the urge to be first. I've never been in contact with other girls, and I don't confess to anyone. Therefore, I won't meet someone and say that I've confessed to them. The voice that was pressed against her ear was still very pleasant to hear. But why was every single one of them talking about her dark history? Chapter 871. According to the Almighty's words. Indeed, she was the one who had the upper hand. She remembered the comments the internet gave the Almighty clearly. The first half, Chin Mo is the only beauty in the world. The second half, it's a pity he can't sleep. Bojo felt that she needed a cigarette to calm herself down. She reached out to push her hair aside, revealing her exquisite features. Brother Mo, give me a cigarette, I need to think about it. Chin Mo chuckled, his cold gaze sweeping over the youngster's face. You mean you want to smoke after bed? Bojo. Why did she seem to be going overboard in front of the Almighty? Chin Mo passed the thin cigarette into her hands. But as he leaned forward, his other hand reached into the blanket. Bojo widened her eyes in shock, her fingers stilling as she held on to the cigarette. What is it? Not used to it. Chin Mo leaned his head against her shoulder, his handsome face tilting slightly. His breath landed behind her ears, his voice carrying a hint of laziness. Weren't you used to it last night? Chin Mo's hand touched the back of her waist. It was smooth and slightly cold. He couldn't help but slide his hand inside. That was why Bojo had such a reaction. Don't hide, I'll let you touch it. Chin Mo pulled her into his arms, his voice sounding as though it was a normal thing. I can't let you sleep for free. Bojo shrunk slightly. Every part of her body was warm. She didn't manage to smoke. Instead, she was taken advantage of. Every part of her body seemed to evoke that familiar numbness. But there wasn't even a piece of clothing by her side. In the end, Chin Mo stopped, afraid that he wouldn't be able to control himself. Bojo's beautiful face was flushed, even her hair was in a mess beside her ears. She seemed to have been taken advantage of. Indeed, she had been taken advantage of. But the person who had taken advantage of her was truly evil. Do you like it? Chin Mo chuckled lightly, pressing his lips against her ear. You had the same reaction last night. Jill was still shy, the tips of her ears turning red. She continued to argue. Brother Mo, can we talk about it? Can we not talk about what happened last night? Hearing this, Chin Mo's smiling eyes turned cold. Sure, let's talk about how you're going to take responsibility. Bojo knew she couldn't escape. She arched a brow. Are you sure you want me to take responsibility? I'm afraid you'll regret it. Regret? Chin Mo crossed his long legs and looked at her with his deep eyes. He was still so perfect. It seems like you have a feasible plan. Does it count if I want to kidnap you to the Fifth Avenue? Bojo almost blurted out. Fortunately, she was rational and wasn't tempted by the man in front of her. Nothing much, I just wanted to hear how Brother Mo wants me to take responsibility. Bojo caressed her nose. They were at the negotiation table, it wasn't the time to feel guilty. Chin Mo's lips carried a smile, forming his own noble air. It wasn't that warm. How do you think a man and woman who have sex should be held responsible? Bojo glanced up at him. She wanted to say something, but in the end, she didn't avoid it. Instead, she went straight to the point. It depends on the situation. After talking for so long, you've never thought of taking responsibility. How could Chin Mo not understand the youngster? He stood up from the bed, his eyes still as deep as the sea. They were very beautiful, but the ocean had already sunk during their conversation, all the warmth sucked away. It seems like I really have to handcuff you for you to learn to be obedient. Chapter 872. Bojo knew she had to take responsibility for this matter. In reality, she wanted to take responsibility more than anyone else. However, one day in the near future, the Almighty would definitely regret the decision he had made today. Hence, she couldn't allow things to develop to that stage. Bojo only wanted one thing in her entire life. When she was young, it was Chin Mo. When she grew up, it was still Chin Mo. He lay back down, raised his arms, and covered his eyes with a sigh of regret. There would always be someone like that. It's something you can't get no matter how much you want it. Because she was afraid that one day, that person would look at her differently. Bojo had once thought about how great it would be if the Almighty could belong to her. She wasn't good at cooking, but she was good at instant noodles. Besides, she was good at earning money. The Almighty liked to read about deductions. She could build a huge bookshelf for him. But she could break away from that. Most importantly, she could arrest the criminal. She was a hacker and had been on the list every year. Other than not hurting people, her methods of doing things were not allowed by the law, nor were they allowed by the Almighty. It was one thing to clear her name, but it was another thing to capture her. The Almighty had already expressed his intentions clearly. Bojo knew that it was a good thing for her. No one except the Almighty would want to help a criminal. That was why Bojo had been shocked. She had even wondered if there would be a glimmer of hope. But the reality was that they were both black and white. Helping her was because the Almighty only cared about the matter and not the person. In the future, if there was such a day, after her identity was exposed, when the Almighty wanted her to take responsibility, she would definitely bring him home to raise. More importantly, the Almighty's suspicions wouldn't be dispelled so easily. Bojo was right. If not, Fatty wouldn't have been studying the computer in the police station. The next day, he had some news and called Chin Mo. Young master, I used the system recovery function and there are indeed traces of operation on the D drive. But the traces are missing, so I can't be sure if the computer has launched an attack. Fatty scratched his head and said, that's because those traces might be a cache created when something was downloaded. Speaking up to this point, Fatty paused. Young master, the computer in the coffee shop is clearly the one with the traces of a network attack. Why is young master so interested in this computer? Chin Mo didn't answer. Instead, he asked, if we set up a mature defense program and pass it to someone else, will it affect its use? If your skills are good, you probably won't. Fatty was telling the truth. I've never played like this before. Chin Mo listened to Fatty's words. In his mind, the youngster was indeed calm, even calmer than him. No matter how much his body liked it, his eyes were still clear and overly rational. She had always been like this, never taking anything to heart. She could start at any time, and she could also end it at any time. Thinking of this, Chin Mo clenched his fists. His black hair covered his body as he stood tall and straight. His expression couldn't be seen at all, but it was gloomy and cold. Chapter 873. Young master, are you saying that Z might have transferred the firewall's operating system to another computer and got someone else to activate it to divert our attention? In reality, Z isn't in the cafe but somewhere else? Fatty wasn't dumb. Combining the questions his boss had asked him before, he deduced the answer in one go. But it's too difficult to do that. Not only does it require the implant to have superior network skills, the person working with it has to be good at seizing the time. Fatty still felt that the possibility was low. Chin Mo glanced up, his voice calm. Don't forget, Z is on the move. In other words, nothing was impossible. Fatty paused for a moment. Indeed, he felt that anything was possible. Chin Mo tilted his head, lighting a cigarette for himself, his long fingers holding it. Have you checked the surveillance cameras in the cafe? You didn't miss anything? Yes, I've checked all of them. Because this coffee shop is a well-known chain restaurant, and there are a lot of people coming and going, it's impossible for the staff to remember every customer. There are an average of thousands of customers here every day, and the person using the computer didn't seem to order anything. Instead, he went straight up to the second floor and sat by the floor-to-ceiling window. Unfortunately, the surveillance camera at that position was broken yesterday afternoon. We did make an appointment to repair it at night, but it happened while we were repairing it. Fatty knew that when explaining the case to the young master, the more detailed the better. Chin Mo took a puff of the cigarette, leaning against the wall. His chiseled face was shrouded by the smoke, his expression hard to see. It seems like someone got the information on the commercial square before the crime squad did. They even knew which surveillance camera was broken. It's not simple. Yes. Fatty paused, seeming to have thought of something important. But there is something. Young master, do you remember the surveillance video you asked me to pull out? According to the customers on the second floor, the person sitting in front of the computer was wearing the cinema uniform. Even though no one saw his face, the key point is that he was wearing the cinema uniform. Young master, I asked a manager of the cinema. He said that before the incident, there was a problem with the locker and it was one of their staff who informed him. But when he asked about the follow-up work, the staff disappeared. He was puzzled too. We all know what happened next. Someone handed the contents of Yu Hongliang's locker to the police. Fatty paused and forced himself to ask, so, young master, shouldn't you get rid of your suspicions about Little Spade? It's obvious that the person who pretended to be a staff member was the one at the coffee shop, and Little Spade was playing games on the 5th floor at that time. It doesn't seem possible. Is that so? Qin Mo glanced at the flickering cigarette. Then tell me, why did he disappear after the competition? He didn't even put on his uniform. Fatty choked and couldn't say anything. Qin Mo fell silent. Fatty's logic wasn't wrong this time. The results were completely different from what he had written. Chapter 874. Brushing past each other in the cafe, we can basically see what the other party is wearing. That shouldn't be a problem. Fatty spoke of his conjecture. But it was the most logical conjecture. Qin Mo's eyes dimmed. It's a perfect crime, there doesn't seem to be a single flaw. Fatty didn't know what else to say. Usually, when young master said such things, it meant that he didn't fully believe the outcome. Qin Mo reached out to pour himself a glass of wine. When he placed the ice cubes in, his gaze deepened. Tell me, what did you find from the car keys? Ardwolf is in charge of this, we will have to wait another day to get the driving records. Fatty scratched his head. Young master, Supreme Alliance will be heading to the neighboring city in the afternoon to prepare for the second match. You and Little Spade, you guys, he had heard that young master had handcuffed Little Spade last night. Handcuffs. How much hatred and resentment was there? It seems like you are really interested in my private life. Qin Mo asked slowly. Fatty replied immediately, no, really. I think it's better to keep Little Spade alive if we are to face Lin Qintao. Brothers, he had tried his best, risking his life to protect Little Spade. Fatty glanced at the endless messages in the Alliance's WeChat group. But he couldn't understand why the voice on the other side of the phone had suddenly turned cold. There was an indescribable wetness in it. I want to keep him but he isn't willing. With that, his boss hung up the phone. Fatty was confused. What did he mean by willing? Little Spade wasn't willing. That wasn't possible. Little Spade had threatened to torture the other party until they called him daddy. Fatty didn't know that Qin Mo's unwillingness wasn't what he thought it was. At the main house of the Qin family, Madame Zhang was still in the kitchen. She walked over with a plate of fruits, pausing slightly when she saw the wine glass in Qin Mo's hand. It wasn't her young master's style to start drinking before noon. Besides, he had been fine before but now, Madame Zhang could clearly feel an indescribable feeling. It was cold but there was something else. Fortunately, Qin Mo didn't stand there, turning around. Madame Zhang, bring me a set of clothes, something young Master Fu can wear. Okay, okay. Auntie Zhang felt that this was right. If there was anything that two people couldn't talk about, there shouldn't be a Cold War, right? Upstairs, the handsome youngster looked at her phone. After reading the message, her eyes turned cold. She deleted it and sent a few words over. There's a problem with Rao Rong, I need to keep an eye on him. How are you now? Good, the same movie uniform you asked me to prepare is very useful. Hoshino sat at the very end of the line, but he couldn't hide his jade-like presence no matter what. The person next to him saw that he was sending a message and poked his head over. Who is it? Who is it? Take out. Hoshino put away his phone and looked at the comic book in front of him. Chapter 875. With that, he scanned the surroundings. If the opponent is Xiangnan, what are your chances of winning? No one spoke. After a second, someone removed the magazine covering his face. Someone lifted the magazine covering his face. He had a handsome face and hair longer than a girl's, but it didn't affect his aura at all. 100%. The club manager smiled, his eyes shining brightly. Good, that's what we need. I'll go discuss the price with the investors and the sponsorship. Before the manager could finish his sentence, Hoshino stood up. Hoshino stood up, stuffing a hand into his pocket as he headed towards the door. Before he left, he tossed a bomb. If Supreme Alliance and not Xiangnan were the champions of the National League, the chances of winning wouldn't be 100%. After saying this, he walked out of the conference room. The manager widened his eyes. What does he mean? What does Hoshino mean? He means it literally. Mei Nan laughed, asking the member beside him in a flirtatious manner, your vice-captain went to watch Supreme Alliance's competition again yesterday? Ah. He went. I don't know, but he didn't sleep in the dormitory yesterday. He really went. Mei Nan caressed his lips. Why is he so interested in Supreme Alliance? Outside the door, in the deep corridor, Hoshino glanced at the photo of a certain someone smiling faintly while playing. His lips curved upwards. He really wanted to have a match with them. After all, he had never seen Z in that photo before. Second floor of the Qin family's house. Bo Jiu glanced around. She didn't have any clothes to wear, so she put on the jacket that the Almighty had left on the rattan chair. The advantage of being tall was that she could wear the jacket as a skirt. She was so self-reliant because she felt that she had to clean up the bedsheets. It wouldn't be convenient if Madame Zhang did it. Anyone who had been there would know what had happened when they saw the red. It would be best to keep the fact that she had slept with the Almighty a secret. Bo Jiu wasn't good at household chores, hence, she wasn't gentle when she removed the bedsheets. Princess stomped on the wooden floor, his hair about to explode. It was fine if she had thrown a pillow, but she had thrown it at his head. Was she doing it on purpose? Also, how stupid must you be to not even know how to remove a bedsheet? Even master is better than you, meow. Qin Mo also realized that every time he went out and came back, the person and the cat in the room would definitely cause trouble for him. The moment Qin Mo walked in, Princess had already returned to her nest in an arrogant manner. With a domineering expression, she started to bite her fake mouse, as if she had not participated in the incident and had not bitten the bedsheets. Bo Jiu arched a brow. She looked at the cat's betrayal in disdain. Then she glanced up at the Almighty. As smart as Qin Mo was, he knew what was going on. You can't even settle a bedsheet? Geniuses are bound to have some flaws. Bo Jiu raised her fingers, finally pulling the bedsheet out. Chapter 876. Qin Mo suppressed the thoughts in his mind. When there was only warmth left, he pulled her into his arms. Bo Jiu paused. She was surrounded by the Almighty's scent, the scent of tobacco mixed with a hint of alcohol. It wasn't heavy, but when mixed with the scent of plants, it was indescribably pleasant. It was easy to lower one's guard. But the Almighty's hand went numb. Bo Jiu tried to dodge, but she was pressed down. However, she was pressed down, and a faint voice said, "You don't want to wear your clothes anymore?" Ever since the Almighty had entered, she had noticed the thing in his hand. She reached for it. Qin Mo shifted his hand away, his gaze deep. Stay. What did he mean by stay? Bo Jiu arched a brow. His long and fair fingers drew out a white strip. That was. Bo Jiu's ears turned red. She knew what the Almighty was about to do. He tore her jacket and went around her back, his voice right beside her. Do you know that this will stop you from growing? What growing? Bo Jiu dodged the cold and numbing breath. She felt her chest tighten. She stopped talking and his fingers slid down her body. Anyone would want to retaliate after being manipulated like that. Qin Mo pressed down on Bojio's raised wrist slowly. Do I need to remind you that you slept with me for free? I'm just helping you wear your clothes. Why aren't you willing? Do you want Madame Zhang to send the clothes over personally and see you naked on my bed? MMH? Bojio arched a brow. Before she could say anything, she lifted him up and placed him on her lap. He was really helping her wear her clothes. But when his fingers brushed past certain areas, her face was so red it looked like it was going to bleed. Her heart was racing. The Almighty seemed to like it, his lips curving upwards. She bit her lips, the corners of her eyes glistening as she watched the man's sculpted side profile. The Almighty seemed to always be like this. Regardless of the situation, he would never damage his looks. Even his figure was calm and elegant. Even though he was doing such a thing, the Almighty took about 10 minutes to put on a simple t-shirt and long pants. In the end, Bojio could only bear with it. He couldn't really let Auntie Zhang in. In reality, Bojio didn't even need to think to know that she was the only one who could make young Master Qin serve her personally. It would be a lie if the cat said that it was not jealous. The princess raised its big face and deeply felt that it had lost its master's love for it. What do you want to do with the sheets? Qin Mo tilted his head and asked the person on his lap. The coldness in his eyes lessened. Surprisingly, it felt good to help a certain someone put on clothes. He could try it every day in the future. Of course, the prerequisite was that this person was obedient enough. With this in mind, Qin Mo's gaze deepened. Wash it. At this moment, Bojio felt as though she had armor. She could finally roll up her sleeves and face the Almighty head-on. She had to remind him that this was her first time as well. But the Almighty's shamelessness was right here. At this moment, he stood up and glanced at her, his voice faint. Auntie Zhang made your favorite pork ribs. Go down and eat first, I'll wash the sheets. As the Almighty spoke, he rolled up the sleeves of his shirt twice, revealing his porcelain and beautiful wrist. He was like a walking mannequin hanger. He picked up the bed sheets and strolled into the bathroom. Bojio hesitated for a moment before following him. She stood at the bathroom door and watched the Almighty's next actions. It was very orderly. Since young, Bojio had admired people who could do housework well. Not to mention the Almighty, who was handsome, had a good aura and was good at work. Qin Mo seemed to have caught sight of a certain someone. His beautiful brows arched. Actually, it was hard not to see that face. That face was blessed by the heavens and had a strong presence. Even though the color of her hair had changed, she was much more obedient. But there were some people who couldn't change their arrogant aura. Indeed, she didn't seem like a girl. He couldn't be blamed for not recognizing her. Of course, that wasn't the case. Another thing was that she was good at disguising. Z was the same, aren't you hungry? Qin Mo's hands were stained with white foam. His black pants were straight as he tilted his head to support the sink. It was a different kind of handsomeness. Bojio leaned against the sink lazily, a handsome smile on her face. Let's go down together after Brother Mo is done. Come over, Qin Mo instructed. Bojio arched a brow. What? Help me light a cigarette, the lighter is in my pocket. Qin Mo used his chin to point to his long pants. Bojio wasn't afraid of a cigarette. She took one over. The man didn't take it, instead, he lowered his lids and bit it with his lips. Even Bojio had to admit that the Almighty couldn't shift his gaze away, especially when he pressed down on the lighter she had raised. His lashes lowered and the smoke filled the air. Bojio found this Almighty a rare sight, especially in life. There was a cigarette dangling from his thin lips, his long and beautiful hands covered in foam. He stood there in his white shirt and black pants, tall and handsome, giving off a manly vibe. Who would have imagined that young Master Qin would wash the bedsheets like this? Bojo clenched her fists tightly, suppressing the urge to lean over and kiss him. She blushed for a long time, turning one round. When she turned the second round, Chin Mo glanced up. Chin Mo lifted his lids. She must have washed the bedsheets clean, water dripping from her fingertips. That was when Bojo realized that a man like the Almighty was worth kidnapping both in bed and out of bed. She had to be more discreet. She didn't want to expose her ambition. Everyone knew Bojo's ambition, to kidnap Chin Mo. The Almighty was probably the only one who wasn't aware of her ambition. What were you thinking when you circled me twice just now? The sudden voice made Bojo feel guilty. She avoided the deep eyes that seemed to be able to see through everything. She smiled, revealing her canine teeth. Washing the bedsheets doesn't seem to fit your image, Brother Mo. I grew up in the military and washed the bedsheets myself. Chin Mo's tone was calm, as though he was describing something normal. Bojo felt that the Almighty's upbringing was really good. It was probably because of his pure red background that the Almighty was able to develop into his current self. In the past, she had interacted with many powerful descendants, but there weren't many like the Almighty. The person who shouldn't have to do housework was actually good at housework. But he grew up in the military. The Almighty had really forgotten everything about his childhood. He didn't have any memories at all. What exactly had happened back then for the Almighty to become like this? Chapter 877. The temperature outside the window rose slowly. At the same time, in a certain luxurious district in Jiang City, the girl's expression was extremely dark. She ignored the people beside her. She had the habit of ordering takeout, otherwise, she wouldn't have so many takeout bags. Besides her, there were two other people in the room. One of them had a tattoo on his arm while the other was tall and skinny with a sharp mouth. What should we do next? Didn't they say that China isn't good at criminal investigations? Why are they doing so much this time? Even the car is being investigated. If this carries on, we will have to change locations. The tattooed guy wasn't bothered. What are you afraid of? We have a backer too, haven't we already contacted them? Some people are only interested in money, it's normal for them to give up on clues. Besides, it's just a car, it's just a test. Do you think we won't be able to do anything if we really meet them? Don't forget, the crime squad still has. Enough. The girl cut him off. Rao Rong will be here later, don't tell him about this, including what we are trying to do with Yu Hongliang. The tall and skinny guy chuckled. Of course we know that. Rao Rong is the same, we have been together for so long, what haven't we done together? Why can't he understand some things? I'll slowly work on Rao Rong's thoughts, but he hasn't had enough time. He hasn't been in the esports industry for long and he's still thinking about his old teammates. I can tell that he's moved after coming back, but once a person turns gray, it won't be easy to turn white again. Hee, Rao Rong is too naive. Don't bother about him, get your contacts to ask if there's an expert hacker in the crime squad. Who exactly is this person? I want to know everything about him. At this point, the girl's eyes darkened. As for the car, it was scrapped. The clues we found were limited. Don't worry, we're not Chinese. Even if we find something one day, we can just leave. As for the rest, we have the help of the person above us. What's there to be afraid of? Besides, I received news that a new criminal expert will be joining the crime squad. Another one investigating us? The tattooed guy frowned. How is that good news? The girl chuckled. You don't understand. In China, relationships are always complicated. Even between officials, there is a need to consider the bigger picture. How should this person be moved and how should that person be placed? Turning a blind eye is the best way for everyone to get along. The higher-ups said that the criminologist was recommended for the sake of performance. After all, we caused such a huge commotion and anyone who managed to catch us would be considered a merit. But here's the main point, with one more person, it would take time for Chin Mo to mobilize the crime squad members. The tattooed man's eyes lit up. Are you saying that Chin Mo's power might be taken away? But he is the Chin family's. The Chin family will not interfere in this matter. The girl interrupted him. It is not within the scope of our duties. Chapter 878. The tall and slender man listened to their conversation and moved his mouse. Then, he paused. I think you guys should come over and take a look at this. Someone did an analysis on the forum. Some hackers said that we aren't Z, we're just imitating Z, don't bother with this kind of person. The girl smiled contemptuously. If he has the ability, let him find evidence. Ha, saying that I'm imitating. Don't tell me Z's hacking skills have become exclusive to him. What a bunch of stupid hacker fans. I have my own stuff, they'll know in the future. Go do what you have to do, go do what you need to do. As soon as she finished speaking, a man in a black hoodie walked in. His handsome face was cold. What's going on with you, Hongliang? The tall and slender man stood up. Rao Rong, lower your voice, the checks are very strict. He didn't just sleep with others, right? Rao Rong's gaze wavered. Other than those damn women, what else did he do? The tattooed man didn't think much of it. It's just to get some goods out through him. Why are you so agitated? Merchandise? Rao Rong's gaze trembled. Powder. As he spoke, he turned his head and looked at the girl. We said that we would only punish those who deserve to be punished. What do you mean now? The girl glanced at him, placing the things in her hands down. Her face was still as sweet as ever. Don't be so agitated, Rao Rong, you have to know that no matter what you do, you need funds. If not, how would you be able to return to the esports scene? Rao Rong clenched and unclenched his fists. The girl looked at his expression and smiled. Alright, let's not talk about this anymore. You still have a competition tomorrow, so prepare well. This is what you like the most. The higher-ups have also sent news that if you win this match, they will make a lot of money. You can also continue to stay in the esports scene. The club has already prepared to renew your contract. In the future, not only will you be able to compete, but you will also be able to do some live broadcasts. Rao Rong glanced at her, retracting his hand. I only compete. Alright, alright, alright. I'll just play in the competition. The tall and slender man interjected, placing his arm on the man's shoulder. What's wrong with you, Hongliang? If those women behaved themselves a little and didn't go after those rich men, this wouldn't have happened, right? There are always people who make things like ice powder. Now that the checks are strict, we won't sell too much. Rao Rong tilted his face. He was dressed in black, his gaze deep. I've said it before, I won't lay my hands on ordinary people unless they deserve to die. With that, Rao Rong pushed him away and walked out of the apartment. Chi! Do you really think you're a plaything? The tattooed man didn't have a good temper. He glared at Rao Rong's back view, his eyes filled with malice. Why do we need such a person to join us? The girl wasn't happy, but she knew the effect she had to achieve. Because of his identity and his understanding of Chin Mo's tactics, 100 crimes committed by a stranger can't be compared to a single crime committed by someone close to you. This is the most effective way to deal with Chin Mo. Rao Rong's emotions aren't stable right now, there are some things that we need you to do. Spade Z, the member of Supreme Alliance's starting lineup, help him create more trouble. We should prepare for a real sacrifice, to let Chin Mo know that there are some things he can't do. In order to obtain a person, one must first destroy them. Chapter 879. Rao Rong walked out of the apartment, the emotions in his eyes hadn't calmed down. It was an indescribable pain. Leave. He couldn't bear to. Because he wanted to come back. Because he wanted revenge. But he had assumed that the revenge would be in the esports arena, using the strength that those people had mocked him in the past to decide the outcome. And those black-hearted businessmen who had been protected. But he was getting more and more confused about what he was doing. The phone in his pocket kept ringing. Rao Rong slid the screen open, Lin Chintao's voice coming from the other side, the liveliness almost warm. "Captain, where are you? Everyone is waiting for you, hurry back and bring me a bowl of fried noodles. I'm afraid I'll be hungry after a 2-hour train ride. I heard Supreme Alliance will be in another carriage, I'll only be able to play with Spade Z and the others after I'm full, I have to win in terms of aura." Rao Rong didn't say a word. Even he didn't understand why the annoying voice would make him feel so at ease at this moment. It was probably because there wasn't anyone else who could think of him that way anymore. There wasn't a single person left. Rao Rong stuffed a hand into his pocket, his voice hoarse. "I'll be there in a minute." The other end broke into laughter. "Hurry, it's the National League." That was right, it was the National League. The National League his father had always wanted to see. "Our Rao Rong, he's really good at gaming. He'll definitely bring us the championship." The moment he closed his eyes, he could see the face in his memory and the cold expression in the end. He had never believed that his father would commit suicide. That day, he had been waiting for him. Rao Rong tightened his grip, the phone heating up along with his eyes. In the end, he stuffed his phone into his pocket, his back view arrogantly entering the taxi. Lin Feng was also rushing him. He had hesitated for a long time before making the call. Mainly, there hadn't been any news from Little Spade. When their captain had left yesterday, he had been exuding a demonic aura. Making the call was akin to asking for trouble. Thinking about it, it wasn't easy for Lin Feng to be in charge of the harmony of the team. On the other side, the Qin family had just started their meal. In Bo Jiu's words, the Qin family's delicacies had always been particular. It wasn't luxurious, but it was the authentic northern way of eating. Just the sight of it was enough to whet one's appetite. The spiced beef was cut into large pieces and there was chili oil at the side. The best way to eat it was to dip it in and take a bite. But obviously, someone didn't allow her to eat spicy food. They only asked Auntie Zhang to place a small plate far away from her, right beside the Almighty. This made it impossible for Bo Jiu to sneak a touch. She rested her arms lazily behind her back, sitting like a playboy. Her face was still handsome, but she seemed to have lost all meaning in life. Auntie Zhang wanted to laugh as she watched from the side. In the end, she made a small green onion pancake for the young man. She added some meat sauce, cut some cucumber strips, and wrapped it around the beef. The aroma lingered in her mouth. Bo Jiu shifted her attention away from the chili oil. Her table manners were elegant and manly. Half of her face was puffed up as she ate the pancake. Her appetite was shockingly huge. Qin Mo arched a brow and placed some food he didn't like on the youngster's plate. Bo Jiu didn't say anything and just swept the food. She had been like this since young, eating carrots that pets didn't like. Madame Zhang shook her head. She was starving the child. Chapter 880. Qin Mo scooped soup for the youngster while placing his phone on the dining table. Lin Feng's call came in at this moment. Bo Jiu paused when she saw the caller ID. She arched a brow and said playfully, "Senior Lin, pick it up." Qin Mo didn't free his hand, his handsome face expressionless. Bo Jiu bit her chopsticks casually and leaned over to swipe the phone. "Hello." On the other end of the line, Lin Feng was a little confused. Wait a minute, why was that Little Spade's voice? Lin Feng moved his phone away slightly, glancing at the number he had dialed. It was his captain's, he didn't make a mistake. Are these two together? Lin Feng's heart was in turmoil. How could they be together so soon? The Fu and Qin families weren't neighbors like the Yun and Lin families. It wasn't even an hour's drive away. Besides, their captain had been furious yesterday, he was obviously going to punish her. Little Spade? Lin Feng asked for confirmation. Bo Jiu smiled devilishly. That's me. You're actually able to stay by Captain's side unscathed. Lin Feng couldn't help sighing. Bo Jiu arched a brow. What was this? I even slept with your captain. But she couldn't say that in front of the Almighty. We're eating. He meant that it wasn't convenient for them to talk. Lin Feng was a smart person and understood his brother's hint. Come to the train station after you and Captain are done, the train is at 2 p.m. We'll talk on WeChat. Bo Jiu was curious about what Lin Feng wanted to say. The moment she turned on her phone, her WeChat vibrated. Qin Mo lifted his lids and swept a glance at the youngster. He could roughly guess who had sent the message. His deep gaze shifted away. It was good to let Lin Feng teach this fellow a lesson. Otherwise, she would just throw her uniform away and leave. Lin Feng's main attack. Little Spade, just confess. Where did you go after the competition yesterday? You have no idea how awful Captain's expression was. I even suspected he was going to dig 3 feet into the ground to teach you a lesson. He didn't just dig 3 feet into the ground, he even blocked the ceiling, preventing me from displaying my handsomeness. This was something Bo Jiu couldn't say, so she asked, why did you change your WeChat ID? Main attack. Where was the attack? It's all because of Hu Zi. F***ck, I suddenly feel that he's really scary. Lin Feng paused for a moment, then said, let me put it this way. Some time ago, during the school exam, it was just like usual. I was first and he was second. How many years has it been? Ever since junior high school, it has always been like this. After all, there are some big questions that he doesn't know how to solve. But in the end, this morning, I took a look at his draft. He wrote all the big questions and they were all correct. Tell me, what is this person thinking? Bo Jiu glanced at the message. Since she had slept with the Almighty, she understood the basic thought process. She replied in a comforting tone, Senior, it wasn't easy for you to survive until now without sleeping with Almighty Yun. Ever since she was young, she had always given in to one person. Wasn't it all for the sake of eating it in the end? Just like how she treated the Almighty. Chapter 881. Would you be able to sleep with Yun who with just 3 of you? Bo Jiu was doubtful of Lin Feng's fighting ability, but in order for Almighty Yun to sleep with Lin Feng, she suggested, you can try and sleep with him, let's see who can sleep with him. No matter how naive Lin Feng was, he wouldn't use this as a test. He hadn't forgotten what Yun Hu had done when he had entered the room that day. That huge fellow had been terrifying. How exactly did he develop? He had even sneaked a peek at his diet to see what he had eaten. He hadn't eaten any chives either. F***ck, if it was real. No, it couldn't be real. Lin Feng was irritated and replied, why don't you try it out with Captain and see who can sleep with whom? Is there a need to try? Bo Jiu didn't want to brag about sleeping with the Almighty as it would attract too much hatred. I'm still eating, let's not talk about it. Lin Feng replied, wait a minute. What? Bo Jiu arched a brow. Lin Feng coughed lightly. It's like this, I've been doubting my own charm recently. Don't worry, to Almighty Yun, you don't have to do anything and your charm will still be there. Bo Jiu smiled devilishly. Lin Feng replied, I'm not talking about him, someone else. Someone else? Bo Jiu paused. Who is it? A girl who confessed to me, she was too sincere, I couldn't reject her. Lin Feng's tone was obviously showing off. You don't know, but after I found out about this, I've been thinking about how to describe this to you guys so that you guys will believe that I'm not bragging. You guys? Bo Jiu arched a brow. How many people did you tell? A few in the Alliance chat, Lin Feng replied, sending an emoticon with a cigarette in its mouth. Bo Jiu chuckled. I thought you would persevere till the end of the National League, but now, Senior Lin, you're just forcing me to give in. Good luck, the Almighty and I are going out. After being reminded by the youngster, Lin Feng suddenly thought of something. For example, a certain someone had said that during the National League, it would be best for him not to find a girlfriend. Otherwise, it would affect his mood. If he was in a bad mood, his skills might also drop. This was clearly a threat. He was someone who cared about the whole team, so he should reject the girl first. First of all, he wasn't afraid of anyone. Let's do that. Lin Feng thought hard for a while and said seriously, for an esports player, playing games is the most important thing, so I'm sorry, I can only disappoint your love. After sending this reply, Lin Feng took a look at the Alliance group chat. What worried them the most was that Yun who didn't say anything in the group even though he was there. So, did the other party see his words just now? Lin Feng thought about it and decided to test the waters from the side. He opened a private WeChat chat window. Bro, how about we play a game? What are we playing? Instant reply. In other words, he had been staring at his phone's screen the whole time. What about the group chat? Lin Feng scratched his head. Yun who sent another message. What are you playing? Lin Feng, how about I compliment you and you compliment me? Yun who replied, sure, you go first. Lin Feng, you're so handsome. You have good taste, Yun who replied. Chapter 882. F***CK. Lin Feng almost flipped the table. Didn't you say that if I complimented you, you would compliment me? You were clearly complimenting your big brother. Did you really think that I was just a naive person? I also have the ability to analyze words, understand. Lin Feng was just about to rise when Yun who sent another message. Yun who sent another message. I heard someone confess to you. Lin Feng's rising heart shrank a little, but he replied righteously, I already rejected her. Are you happy to be confessed to? Yun whose eyes dimmed as he typed slowly. Lin Feng felt that it would be too fake to say that he wasn't happy at this moment, he was simply secretly happy. We are all men, we all know that I would definitely be happy to be confessed to. Yun who arched a brow and replied, is that so? Then why did you frown when I confessed to you and even fought with me? Lin Feng wanted to jump again when he saw that message. How could it be the same? You confessed to me so that you could sleep with me. You confessed to me so that you could sleep with me. Who wanted to sleep with me? There was a fundamental difference, alright? Unfortunately, before Lin Feng could express his thoughts, Yun who sent another message. Since you guys like to be confessed to, I can confess once a day if you can take it. Lin Feng recalled the scene of Yun who confessing to him. He really had enough. He hung up his phone and didn't want to speak anymore. But he obviously couldn't remain silent. Because the moment he threw his phone on the table, he heard his mother praising someone in the living room. You've become even more handsome. Your face is completely different from our little Feng's, it's sharp and handsome. Lin Feng, he was handsome too. Who exactly was his biological son? You guys are going to another city for a competition today, right? Have a good competition. The main thing is to keep an eye on little Feng, Auntie has a feeling that something has been bothering him recently. Mother Lin was born beautiful and wore a professional suit. She was over 50 years old, but her skin was very fair. It could be seen from whom Lin Feng had inherited his good looks. However, at this moment, Mother Lin seemed to want to say something but stopped herself. Yun who had always been calm and knew what she was talking about. He didn't finish his sentence, carrying his backpack on one shoulder. There was a laptop and mechanical keyboard in the bag, but he didn't seem tired at all. At this moment, his height gave him the advantage. Did he do something to make Auntie worry again? Come here. Mother Lin glanced around before pulling Yunhu to the side. She lowered her voice and said, it's like this. This morning, when I was helping little Feng pack his things, I suddenly saw a book. That book. The content is about the psychological trends of people with unique sexual orientations. There are also some physiological analyses. Even though I heard that guys who like to play games like to play as female characters, it shouldn't affect Little Feng's sexual orientation. What exactly is wrong with him? Yunhu tightened his grip on the strap of his backpack. He knew why that guy was reading those books. Lin Feng was reading them on his behalf. He wanted to know if his sexual orientation could be cured. Auntie, don't worry, he is probably just curious. I'll talk to him. Mother Lin smiled. I'll be at ease with you helping him. Yunhu didn't know how to deal with that guy when his elder entrusted him with such a task. At this moment, Lin Feng hurriedly ran down the stairs. His black trousers were half rolled up, revealing a portion of his calves. This person's hairstyle was similar to his temperament, always curly. Fortunately, he had inherited it well, or else such a coarse man would not have the characteristics of a straight man. Lin Feng basically had all the characteristics of a straight man, including the jealousy of other people's children. Mom, people who don't know might think I was adopted. If you really like Lin Hu, you can urge him to find a partner in the future. Don't always urge me. Lin Feng jumped down with a gust of wind. He didn't even zip his backpack properly and there was a black "OK" sticker on his face. When Mama Lin saw her son, her true nature was exposed. She slapped him on the back. Look at you, you're already so old. Can't you be more mature? Look at Hu Zi, you're clearly two brothers living in the same courtyard, but why is there such a big difference? Lin Feng had to say that his mother looked especially beautiful on the surface. But that wasn't her true nature. Taekwondo, martial arts, and the fact that his mother had beaten his father into submission when she wooed him. Lin Feng didn't want to talk about how he felt when his mother slapped him in the face. He almost vomited blood. At this moment, his brother still had a conscience. He instinctively pulled him behind him and raised his hand to glance at his wrist. Auntie, we have to catch the high-speed train at 2 p.m. Don't worry, I'll keep an eye on this guy. Only then did Mother Lin stop. She was indeed a changeable elite. Facing Yunhu, she was natural and unrestrained, gentle like a mother. All right, I'll leave Little Feng to you. Lin Feng really wanted to tell his mother, what's there to befriend? The guy you like is still thinking about how to sleep with your son. I'm struggling so hard. Mother Lin was probably still worried. She pulled her sloppy prodigal son to the side. I'm warning you, even if you... With that, Mother Lin felt that this wasn't the time to be too direct. She could only be more reserved. Don't be picky when you're hungry. Don't bully anyone, especially Lin Hu, even if he's handsome, understand? Bear with it at night and don't do anything out of line. Lin Feng really didn't understand. What did she mean by, be picky when you're hungry? Did the Empress Dowager misunderstand something? But Mother Lin didn't give her confused son a chance to understand more. She walked over to Yunhu and said in a low voice, what happened just now will be a secret between you and Auntie. You know that Little Feng has been stubborn since he was young. He's only in his early 20s and his ability to accept new things. I've tried to understand him, but he's probably just confused and doesn't feel threatened. But if he dares to do anything to you, tell Auntie. If it really doesn't work, he might be good at fighting since he's been training with me since he was young, but in fact, his legs turned to jelly. Remember this when you need to retaliate. The Lin family had been neighbors for many years. Yunhu already knew Mother Lin's character. He arched a brow. Auntie, you mean that Lin Feng might do something to me? Chapter 883. Yunhu's expression didn't change as he listened. He was as steady as a mountain and his eyes were deep like the ocean. He was indeed the trump card of the Supreme Alliance. He calmly replied to Mama Lin, okay. If that guy could really do anything to him, he would definitely cooperate. Why would he cripple him? He didn't need to do anything. Even if he allowed him to get close and didn't reject him, he would try his best to keep him by his side. Of course, Yunhu had always known that even though Lin Feng looked innocent, he was a straight man and wasn't easy to change. It wasn't just difficult. Yunhu was clear that if it wasn't for his current identity, that day, he would have to take a few hits to his face. He thought he could try his best. He could try his best to make him accept. If it really didn't work, after the competition, Yunhu glanced up at the guy who was still pulling his hair. They would separate for a period of time. No matter how uncomfortable it was, he had to quit. Lin Feng wasn't sure of Yunhu's thoughts and didn't know what they were talking about. All he knew was that before he left, his mother kept looking at him as though he was a perverted man. The warning in her voice made him puzzled. He was dressed rather well today and hadn't done anything wrong recently. What was wrong with his mother? This was an unsolvable problem. Time trickled by. 1:30 p.m., Jiang City South Station. There weren't any express trains here, only high-speed trains and intercity trains. Hence, it wasn't as congested as the West Station. Even so, there were still many people at the security checkpoint on the second floor. Bo Jiao and Qin Mo were both dressed in pure black uniforms. Not only were they long legs and narrow waists, but they were also handsome in different styles. One could only imagine the scenery. Since yesterday, Bo Jiao hadn't been free to deal with her scumbag father and those who called themselves fans. She could only entrust it to Lawyer Bai. But according to Lawyer Bai, Manager Feng had been dealing with those who wanted to find a chance to attack Supreme Alliance. Those people wanted to make an issue out of yesterday's incident. Manager Feng cooled down first and then released a statement, only mentioning the infringement and not the actual incident. It was obvious that this kind of person with no moral bottom line would get more arrogant the more you cared about him. Besides, his motive was impure and he wanted to gain popularity. As long as Feng Yi ignored him, they couldn't gain popularity even if they wanted to. On the other hand, they couldn't wait to quarrel so that they could become famous. It was a pity that Manager Feng had been in this business for a long time and had encountered all kinds of troublesome kids. How could he please the other party? Even if it was a little troublesome, it didn't affect his intelligence. No matter how many hours he slept, Manager Feng was still smiling. He was good at socializing with people, but the Fu family was the most difficult to deal with this matter, because no one knew whether Su Mei was the only one who knew about Little Spade's disguise as a man, or whether Fu Zhongyi also knew about it. Manager Feng wasn't sure about this matter, so he asked his boss. As a criminologist, such an analysis wasn't difficult for Qin Mo. He replied calmly, if Fu Zhongyi knew about this, he wouldn't be in such a state. He would definitely expose it to the media. That's something a businessman like him would do. Manager Feng also found it hard to understand. This is the first time I've seen someone treat their own child like this. Fu Zhongyi has become like this because of Su Mei. Even without Su Mei, Fu Zhongyi's nature is the same. It was rare that Qin Mo didn't hang up immediately. Selfish, lustful and greedy, abandoning his wife. At that time, Qin Mo had been thinking, if that was the case, it was not surprising that the guy had become like this. It was even less surprising that he wanted to do something with hacking skills. But even so, Qin Mo glanced over and sat in the resting area, his fingers tapping on the keyboard. He still felt that something was amiss. Bo Jiao wasn't aware that the Almighty had his eyes on her again. She sucked on her lollipop, her silver hair covered with a black cap. The cap was facing backwards, looking refreshing. That kind of handsomeness would naturally attract the attention of others. After all, he wasn't a celebrity and wasn't that famous. It wasn't so exaggerated that everyone knew the two of them. After all, esports had yet to become the era of true stars. However, none of these reasons could stop his handsomeness. If Qin Mo's face was suitable to be photographed in a high-end magazine, then Bo Jiao's face was suitable to be remembered. Once, when Spade Z had first appeared, the first thing the media had said when they had seen the youngster's appearance and skills was, "This youngster will definitely be popular in the future." Now, That sentence had come true. It was really popular. They had only been sitting there for a few minutes, but it had already caused quite a commotion. Most of it came from the girls. But it was thanks to everyone's enthusiasm. It allowed the other members, especially Shui Yaoyao, to see the waiting area where they were about to board the bus. But this time, Shui Yaoyao hadn't come alone. After a family reunion dinner, Uncle Jiang had insisted that Jiang Zhua send her off. She had rejected him twice, and just as she was about to reject him for the third time, he had already picked up his keys and left. This way, Shui Yaoyao couldn't reject him anymore. Otherwise, everyone would be able to see that there was something wrong with her and Jiang Zhua. It hadn't been easy for the relationship between the family to recover. Even though her mother hadn't said it, Shui Yaoyao could tell that her mother had been doing well recently. It was probably because Jiang Zhua's resistance towards them had lessened. But it wasn't suitable for anyone to know about her and Jiang Zhua, not to mention the elders. Especially her current relationship with Jiang Zhua. Yesterday, when she had slept in the Jiang family's house, Jiang Zhua had sneaked into her room after the lights had been switched off. The agreement between the two of them would last for a long time. She understood even if he didn't say it. Hence, it wasn't suitable for their parents to know. He probably wouldn't let Uncle Jiang know either. Shui Yaoyao knew what she was to Jiang Zhua. But Shui Yaoyao didn't understand why he wanted her. If he was willing, there would be many girls who would sign such an agreement with him. But she still vaguely knew because he had said, "You won't pester me." It was probably because she didn't pester him. Regardless, Shui Yaoyao's heart was as calm as still water. And she also knew that the Jiang family's relatives had started to look for a marriage partner for Jiang Zhua. That way, the agreement might end earlier. At this moment, Bojiu saw Shui Yaoyao. She stretched out her arm and hooked it at Shui Yaoyao, her lips curved devilishly. Chapter 884. Jiang Zhua saw the youngster's actions, his eyes dimming when Shui Yaoyao walked over. Bojiu hadn't forgotten about the birthday party. She wanted to get close to Yaoyao so that he would understand that Yaoyao had a family too. "How's the preparation?" the youngster asked, tossing another candy into Shui Yaoyao's hands. Shui Yaoyao smiled, her mood lightening. "It's all right, I can coordinate with Feng Shang. It's still a 5v5 position." Bojiu arched a brow. Shui Yaoyao wasn't sure. "I wonder what Almighty Qin's arrangements are." Usually, they would only be distributed after they arrived. His Highness Jiu must be aware of this. Bojiu did know, but it was just to make them look closer. The moment Shui Yaoyao sat down, she placed her arm lazily on the back of the chair. Her silver hair was hooked by the black cap, her long legs slightly crossed, looking extremely cool. She turned to speak softly to Shui Yaoyao. The intimacy was eye-catching in Jiang Zhua's eyes. Jiang Zhua hadn't forgotten why Shui Yaoyao had agreed to be with him. She had been worried that he would help Wu Zhen investigate young Master Fu. He hadn't wanted to agree, nor would he agree. At that time, he had just wanted to provoke this woman. Jiang Zhua hadn't expected it. For this person, she was willing to do anything. It seemed as though the moment he appeared, there wasn't anyone else in her eyes. Things were different now. His hands tightened under the sleeves of his suit, the car keys imprinted in his palm. Jiang Zhua tucked his hand into his pocket and glanced up at Qin Mo. "I have something on, let's drink when I come back." Qin Mo replied, not saying much. Hence, when Shui Yaoyao lifted her head, he was already gone. Bojiu finally asked the truth, "Why is he sending you off?" It wasn't easy for him to reject Uncle Jiang. Shui Yaoyao chuckled. It probably wasn't easy for him to endure until now. "Is that so?" Bojiu lifted her lips playfully. It wasn't clear if it was intentional, but when Jiang Zhua turned back, she placed her arm over Shui Yaoyao's shoulder. Her clean and handsome face was filled with a smile. Jiang Zhua's cold gaze swept past the two of them. When he retracted it, it was obvious that his gaze had deepened. even the way he walked didn't seem like a noble young master anymore. There was an indescribable coldness in him. Shui Yaoyao didn't notice the undercurrent, but it didn't mean that Qin Mo couldn't see it. He glanced at the smile on the young man's thin lips and the action of patting his shoulders. Without further ado, he reached out and pulled up the back collar of the young man's shirt. He lowered his voice and said, "Come with me, let's talk." Shui Yaoyao wanted to save His Highness Jiu, but when Almighty unleashed his aura, he was handsome and hard to deal with. In addition, the young man smiled at her and shook his head. Shui Yaoyao had no choice but to sit down again. Her heart was a little perturbed. The Almighty wouldn't do anything to Highness Jiu, right? Qin Mo wouldn't do anything to the person he had just eaten. It wasn't like he could eat again at the train station. But discipline was still necessary. Chapter 885. Bo Jiu arched a brow, her fingers moving. When she flipped over, her clothes fluttered in the wind, swapping their positions suavely. She seemed excited and mischievous. "Do you want to kiss?" Qin Mo glanced at the person pressing down on his shoulder, his eyes sweeping downwards. "Are you trying to avoid my question?" "What question?" Bo Jiu glanced at the Almighty's expression. "I was just provoking young Master Jiang to prevent Yao Yao from being taken advantage of in the future. It isn't easy to survive in a wealthy family, I'm just being considerate for my team member. If you're in a bad mood, it might affect tomorrow's competition." Qin Mo glanced at her. "Does that mean you're in the right? Humility is a virtue." Bo Jiu smiled, enjoying the feeling of being pressed against the wall. Everyone knew about the high-speed rail station, there weren't any blind spots. This position could be temporarily invisible, but it was impossible to be invisible forever. The passers-by glanced over instinctively, gossiping was human nature. For example, they were now very clear in their hearts. How could a beautiful young man press a very imposing man against the wall? Bo Jiu enjoyed the gazes as it proved that she was better than the Almighty in certain aspects, right? Due to the difference in height, Qin Mo had to lower his lids when he looked at the youngster. His gaze swept over her curved lips, his voice calm. "Since that's the case, let's go back to the previous question, what if I say yes? What do you want?" Bo Jiu hadn't reacted. Just then, someone pressed down on the brim of her hat, lifted her up, and kissed her. The tip of her tongue entered, the slightly cold minty tobacco scent sucking in all the air. Bo Jiu's hat was obviously useful, it could cover their faces. But because of that, no one would disturb them. The kiss lasted for a long time, making her blood race. When the sound of her heart rang, he pressed his lips against hers and gently kissed her twice. His voice traveled over, "Kiss." Bo Jiu felt that she was at a disadvantage this time. The kiss she had imagined wasn't supposed to be like this. She had already pressed the Almighty against the wall, shouldn't she be the one in control? Fortunately, the kiss ended. It wasn't just Supreme Alliance's group, Lin Qintao's group had arrived as well. Just as Lin Feng was about to buy a bottle of water from the vending machine, he saw something he shouldn't have seen. The naive and innocent him was stunned. He forgot to move. Qin Mo glanced over, his gaze cold. Lin Feng immediately came back to his senses. With a serious expression, he said, "Leader, I didn't see anything. You guys can continue, you guys can continue." After saying that, he immediately turned around and left, not even taking the mineral water from the vending machine. But in his heart, it was as if 10,000 alpacas were running. Do you know that imagining it is one thing and seeing it with your own eyes is another? Captain and Little Spade, two men. F***ck, this was a devastating scene for a straight man. He felt that his wife was leaving him. What was going on? What was going on? But, could it be because both of them were very handsome? He actually found it a little pleasing to the eye. Mainly, Little Spade was too daring. He actually kissed the captain forcefully in a corner. Chapter 886. When Yunhu saw Lin Feng was in such a state. He seemed to be in a daze and his face was obviously red. Didn't you go to buy water? Where's the water? With Yunhu's reminder, Lin Feng remembered that he hadn't taken the mineral water but he couldn't explain the reason. He sat on the chair and shut his eyes. I'm not thirsty anymore. The person who had been asking for water wasn't thirsty anymore. Yunhu arched a brow but didn't expose him. When he glanced up, he saw the two of them walking over from the direction a certain someone had come from. His voice was filled with understanding. Did you see something you shouldn't have? Everyone knew how naive Lin Feng was. He jumped immediately. His gaze came into contact with Yunhu's face, especially when he saw the beautiful shape of his thin lips. For some reason, he felt a little awkward. He asked in a rough voice, "What can I see?" With that, he sat back down. Unfortunately, someone came to expose him. "Senior, you forgot your water." It was Bojio. She sat beside Lin Feng, her voice soft. "Did you get a shock?" Lin Feng wanted to reply but when he met Yunhu's gaze, he pulled her to the side. "When did you and Captain progress so quickly? You even kissed, you saw wrongly." Bojio arched a brow. "The Almighty was warning me not to flirt." Lin Feng pouted. "I saw wrongly. Do you think your big brother is blind? Kissing is kissing. I still have that much tolerance. But how did you manage to get the captain? That's too amazing." "Why?" Bojio laughed lightly. "Are you going to use the same trick on Almighty Yun?" Lin Feng covered her mouth. "Don't spout nonsense. I was just chatting casually, why are you so agitated?" Bojio moved his hand away, a playful smile on her face. That wasn't a casual chat. With the two of them guiding him, Lin Feng felt uncomfortable no matter what. Why wasn't the bus checking the ticket yet? He decided that he would sit next to anyone but Yunhu. Otherwise, his imagination would run wild. On the other side of the waiting room was Lin Qintao's team. It was different from Supreme Alliance's free-range policy. Almost all of them were sitting in a row, wearing the same attire and sitting posture. With the club's agent and assistant leading the way, the atmosphere was very strong. However, the atmosphere was too tense. Even someone as talkative as Lin Qintao didn't come over to greet Bojio. Instead, he glanced over. There seemed to be a lot of things to say in that one glance. It was really hard on this chatterbox. Bojio stuffed a hand into her pocket, the candy in her mouth. When she bit down, she realized that her lips were slightly swollen. She licked them and when she met the Almighty's gaze, she stretched. She was used to being free and unrestrained. She really didn't fit in with a professional sports team that had strict control. It could only be said that their styles were not the same. Bojio hadn't expected him to come out of such a place. Now, it seemed that this was not the case. The teams were already calling out names. If anyone was late, the consequences would be unthinkable. Even Lin Qintao became extremely calm at this moment. Chapter 887. Rao Rong was still the same as before, sitting at the front of the team. It was obvious that most of the team respected him. Especially Lin Qintao, he was practically reliant on him. But why was his whereabouts so suspicious? And was it really a coincidence that he had appeared at the cinema yesterday? Bojio pondered over the matter, her gaze meeting Rao Rong's. Through the crowd, Rao Rong's gaze deepened. He must have sensed someone looking at him. Bojio smiled, unperturbed. Rao Rong's expression didn't change, he averted his gaze and lowered his gaze. In reality, Rao Rong had never intended to guard against her. He had placed all his precautions on Qin Mo. After yesterday's incident, Rao Rong finally understood how dangerous profiling was for them. Rao Rong wouldn't show it no matter how bad his mood was. Even though he wasn't sure what was going on, he didn't show it. His phone was ringing, and it was obvious who had sent the message. Rao Rong didn't turn his phone on, his gaze on his manager as he listened to the rest of the team. But things didn't always go smoothly for a famous team. For example, the competition. All the playing order was determined by the club's coach, as well as the people above. For the first match of the 1v1, everyone assumed Rao Rong would be the one to fight. After all, he was the only one who could go toe-to-toe with Qin Mo. But Supreme Alliance wasn't aware of it. The club handed the 1v1 match over to a very young person who liked to play as a warrior. There was a hint of a smile in his eyes as he swept Rao Rong a glance. Lifting his chin, he accepted the responsibility. Lin Chintao wanted to stand up when he saw the outcome. Rao Rong reached out to press him down, his voice calm. Don't let Supreme Alliance see the conflict between us. Lin Chintao tightened his fists, turning his head and punching him viciously. He really did not expect that one day, the captain would receive such treatment. How could the newbie win the 1v1? Was it because his father was an investor? Lin Chintao was infuriated, the anger emanating from his body. His eyes turned red but he remained silent. Sometimes, even in esports, someone had to compromise in order to keep the team going. And that person had always been the one who had sacrificed more for the team. This atmosphere did not last long. Fortunately, the ticketing on the high-speed rail had already begun, so the conflict did not intensify. Rao Rong was the first to stand up, followed by his teammates. The two teams met at the ticket gate. Sparks flew from the collision. Even before the match began, there was already the momentum of a dragon and tiger fighting for supremacy. Neither of the two captains was weak. It was the same for the team members. Everyone knew that this would be the most anticipated match in the national finals. The confrontation between Rao Rong and Qin Mo. The confrontation between Lin Chintao and Bo Jiu. Who is the strongest leader? Who was the strongest assassin? Which team was more qualified to challenge Xiangnan? This battle was of utmost importance. Due to the strong presence of the two teams, and the fact that they were all young and handsome, the two teams were too eye-catching. Many people in the queue were watching. Compared to the other party, Supreme Alliance obviously didn't have any commercial organizations following them. Qin Mo said, "Let's go." Chapter 888. It was a 3-hour journey. At the start, Lin Chintao had intended to cause a ruckus in Spade Z's carriage. But now, he wasn't in the mood. He glanced out of the window and when he couldn't take it anymore, he turned towards Rao Rong. "Captain, Li Noa's skills aren't enough to stop Qin Mo. If we send him out first, we will definitely lose." Rao Rong stopped drinking, twisting the bottle cap. "Don't worry, Qin Mo won't be participating in the 1v1. I'm guessing they will be fighting a 2v2. Lin Chintao was shocked. Qin Mo has never fought a 2v2. Rao Rong chuckled lightly. That was in the past. Don't we have Spade Z now? Why don't we have a 2v2 as well? Lin Chintao almost jumped in excitement. I definitely won't drag down Captain's fighting strength. Next, it was another round of nagging. Most of them were talking about how he would specially target Little Spade after the competition started and how he was the most handsome person in esports. He watched as the person beside him returned to his usual self. Rao Rong glanced into the distance. Sometimes, it was troublesome but it was the best. Lin Feng, who was in the other carriage, wasn't feeling as good. He was frustrated. How hard was it to change seats? They weren't even on the same team and he didn't know how to save him. He tilted his head, meeting Yunhu's gaze. Lin Feng's seat was near the window, making it inconvenient to leave. He grabbed a book and placed it on his face, preventing him from imagining something he shouldn't be imagining. Yunhu adjusted his seat, stood up, and headed towards the dining car. At least, that was how it looked to others. But in reality, he only left after the youngster left. Bo Jiu was smart. She stopped absent-mindedly when she noticed someone following behind her. She turned on the tap, pretending to wash her hands. When she glanced up, she caught sight of the person in the mirror. Yun, who wasn't tactful, his voice calm. What exactly happened when he went to buy water? Bo-jio smiled devilishly, still wearing her hat. Senior Lin, haven't you recovered? It's nothing, I just kissed Captain. No matter how composed Yun-hoo was, he couldn't help but raise his eyebrows when he heard this. Bo-jio leaned over. This is good news for Almighty Yun, it has enlightened him. He will probably be thinking about this the entire night when his team is resting. Yun-hoo glanced at the youngster. The next time you do anything with Captain, try to avoid it. That guy isn't like Captain, he doesn't have a strong mental endurance. Afraid of scaring him away. Bo-jio smiled playfully. Yun-hoo didn't deny it. After he got the answer he wanted, he walked back to his seat and looked at Lin Feng for a moment. Then, he sat down and lowered his voice, it's just a kiss. Is it that serious? Those movies you watched in the past, are they all food for you? Lin Feng pulled the book away from his face and thought to himself, F***ck, how can that be the same? What kind of film am I playing? What were they looking at now? I'm starting to doubt my life, do you understand? But in the end, Lin Feng didn't say anything. He tilted his head and thought about life calmly. Chapter 889. Try what? After Lin Feng finished speaking, he coughed heavily. His expression was manly. F***ck, why was he stuttering like baby Feng? He couldn't lose in terms of aura. Yun-hoo arched a brow. What else can we try? Since you are so concerned about it, why don't you kiss me personally? Speaking of which, you still have your first kiss, right? Lin Feng was on the verge of flipping the table. Who are you looking down on? Who said I still have my first kiss? I have a girlfriend too. His few girlfriends. Everyone was well aware of this. They got close to him because of Yun-hoo. Lin Feng still remembered the last time he broke up with his girlfriend. It was because he saw her hugging Yun-hoo's waist, her head tilted upwards as though she was about to kiss his chin. But even so, he had to maintain his image. Yun-hoo's gaze sank in that instant. Even his voice wasn't the same as usual. That's all. With who? You don't have to worry about that. Lin Feng was serious. Don't say that I don't want to teach you, we are going to compete soon, don't think so much nonsense. But Yun-hoo insisted on this answer. With who? Lin Feng's eyes darted left and right. As a straight man, he would never admit defeat in front of other men. Hence, Lin Feng's face turned red as he lied, it's the girl who wanted to seduce you. Her. Yun-hoo retracted his gaze, his fingers clenched tightly. Lin Feng felt that he had finally managed to deal with it. It was so embarrassing to have his act exposed. Phew. If Bo-jio was here, she would definitely say, Lin Feng, you naive boy, you're provoking him on purpose. It was a pity that Lin Feng didn't have such thoughts. After the conversation, the thoughts that had been troubling him didn't surface, he just tilted his head and fell asleep. The bathroom on the high-speed train was usually cleaner, especially since Jiang City was the first stop. Even if it wasn't clean, Bo-jio had to stay in there to receive a message. This wasn't a message she could receive in front of the Almighty. She had to hide in the washroom. Bo-jio glanced at her phone screen. It was an email, every word related to Rao Rong, including his background and his father's death. Bo-jio's fingers stilled, her eyes darkening as she replied, focus on investigating Rao Rong's father's death, there's something fishy going on. In a high-rise apartment in the city center. On the screen, in the 5v5 hero arena, a red-clothed assassin swept his sword horizontally. When the announcement of 4 kills rang out, he jumped back, making it impossible for the person chasing after him to even catch a glimpse of his shadow. His gaze fell on the lit-up phone screen, and his beautiful thin lips smiled. His face was clear and handsome, and his fingers moved slightly as he replied, "Okay." On the game page, there were still people shouting, "Almighty, wait, add me as a friend." Hoshino had already exited the game, his fingers tapping on the keyboard as he opened an unknown forum. No one knew the existence of the forum. All IPs will be hidden. That place had the most perfect firewall. It could avoid all the Internet Surveillance Bureau's detection. That was one of Z's important ways to obtain information. The young lord of the hacker world wasn't just a joke. Because the firewall here was made by Z himself. Chapter 890. Just like before, Hoshino contacted one of the hackers and got the information. Of course, the reward here wasn't money, but other things that the hacker needed. For example, protection. The true balance of the network needed protection. Because some hackers didn't know what they were like in real life. They could be office workers who already had children, cashiers in internet cafes who cleaned their keyboards, or even otakus who liked to play games. But today, the forum was different. Z hadn't been logged in for a long time. Because it was grayed out, people would guess. Was the person who appeared recently Z? Some said yes, some said no. Different opinions. Hoshino looked at the content and didn't say anything. Because even if this was the world of hackers, not everyone in this world was harmless. He silently cast the net and retreated. There was a rule here, and that was to keep it a secret. There was a mess here, but no one dared to leak any information. This was because once the news got out, that person would definitely suffer the wrath of the entire hacker world. This was because this was where they had the most freedom. They still had a real life, and it was a matter of principle not to reveal each other's identities. It was because someone had leaked information about the people here that Z had built a firewall. No one could find the real IP address of the other party, unless Z went to check it himself. Back then, Z didn't go easy on the person who leaked information. After finding the real person, she dealt with him accordingly. To the hackers, the person who leaked information was undoubtedly an executioner. He wanted to use the information in exchange for some benefits, no matter how many people he would kill. And this person was none other than the girl's brother, the brother of the girl who impersonated Z. So, how could the girl not appear here? The girl was smart, and she never messed around in certain matters. But if she became Z, it would be different. As the owner of this place, she would have the right to listen to all the information. She had to be patient. Even if she wanted to take revenge on the hackers who said her skills weren't up to par, she had to endure it. Because she knew that now wasn't the right time. She had carefully prepared this plan for many years. It was to imitate first, and when the time was right, she could replace her. Another message appeared on the forum. Time passed little by little. When Bojio walked out of the bathroom, she saw Chin Mo standing at the end of the tunnel. The Almighty's words were always profound. For example, this time, he glanced at the young man and said in a calm voice, "I thought you were going to stay in there for as long as the high-speed train takes and then disappear into thin air." Bojio smiled. "Brother Mo, you're overthinking, it's just an upset stomach." "Is that so?" Chin Mo retracted his gaze, standing tall and straight. Even his back view seemed to have a deeper meaning. Usually, when the Almighty said, "Is that so?" it meant that he didn't believe her. It seemed like the Almighty's suspicions about her had never disappeared. He had to be more careful when he contacted Hoshino in the future. Nothing else happened during the rest of the journey. Because everyone was resting with their eyes closed, it was understandable that people would want to sleep at this time. Chin Mo sat beside the youngster, his eyes sweeping the youngster's side profile. His gaze flickered but he didn't say anything, reaching out to hold the youngster's hand. Bojio was half asleep, it wasn't possible for her to pull her hand out. She couldn't fight the drowsiness and when she tilted her head, it landed on Chin Mo's shoulder. This scene happened frequently. Logically speaking, the Supreme Alliance members were used to it. But Shui Yaoyao could see the difference. He felt that the two of them were getting closer. But at the same time, Almighty Qin seemed to be stricter with his supervision over Highness Jiu. At around 4 p.m., the high-speed train arrived at the station. When the Supreme Alliance members walked out lazily, Lin Qintao's team was already at the exit. This was probably the difference between having a businessman and not having one. The car that came to fetch them was still a high-end business car. Lin Feng was emboldened, turning towards Bo Jiu. "Little Spade, why don't you sit on Captain's thighs this time? You should cherish this opportunity." Bo Jiu chewed on the lollipop, her lips lifting into a mischievous smile. "I'll pass." "Senior Lin, why don't you sit on Almighty Yun's thighs to save space? Weren't you looking at Almighty Yun to find a chance to strike?" F***ck, I'm a straight man, why would I strike? When Lin Feng said this, he averted his gaze. He didn't have the intention to attack Yunhu, but he did think about how a person like Yunhu would kiss. At the end of the day, the youngster in front of him had forcefully pushed Captain in that position. Most importantly, he had witnessed it. Lin Feng also made up his mind. It would be better to stay away from Little Spade and the team in the future. What if he got used to seeing her like this? No, that wasn't right. Why would a straight man like him get used to it? The naive Lin Feng was annoyed by Bo Jiu's question. He pulled his hair with all his might. Bo Jiu smiled devilishly. Did he really think that her dark history was that easy to talk about? This time, Yunhu didn't save Lin Feng because he felt that a certain someone should be nurtured in this aspect. It would also save him the trouble of giving kisses to random people in the future. The moment he thought about how those lips had kissed someone else and how those hands had hugged someone else, no matter how Yunhu tried to console himself, he couldn't feel happy. Perhaps this was the feeling of falling in love with a straight man. Because he will never fall in love with you. Even if he could endure it for a while for the sake of his brother, he could not endure it forever. After a long time, he probably wouldn't even be able to endure it anymore. Yunhu clenched his fists tightly, watching the scenery outside the window. His jaw tightened and he remained silent. The Hotel Supreme Alliance stayed in was a local star-rated hotel. This was also Feng Yi's greatest success as a manager. Even though he wasn't there in person, everything else was well thought out. For example, this hotel had its own hot spring. Anyone who heard this would want to relax in the water before the match. Bo Jiu was no exception. But just as the youth took a step forward, the back of his collar was grabbed by someone. Chapter 891. Lin Feng had wanted to place his hand on the youngster's shoulder, but when he heard his captain's words, he retracted his hand instantly. The others lifted their heads silently, watching the ceiling. Since they were in the hot spring alone, it was easy to misunderstand. Qin Mo didn't bother looking at their expressions. He held on to the back of her collar with one hand, entering the other elevator. Did she know how easily they would be exposed for a hot spring bath together? She didn't even have that much self-awareness. How exactly had she managed to remain undiscovered? Qin Mo glanced down, sweeping a glance at the face in his hand. Indeed, she didn't look like a girl. Mainly, she was overly handsome and had a mischievous look on her face. Brother Mo, aren't the hot springs located halfway up the mountain in the backyard? Bo Jiu wanted to play with them. Her current hobby was to tease Senior Lin. It wasn't a good idea to follow the Almighty. Qin Mo watched the numbers on the elevator, his side profile handsome. There's a high-end area, it's on the balcony. It's definitely expensive. Bo Jiu shook her head. Deep down, she was delighted to be able to scam him. The elevator stopped. Qin Mo took a step forward, his voice calm. It's fine, you can pay. Bo Jiu, why are you still standing there? Qin Mo arched a brow. Bo Jiu decided to take the chance to educate the Almighty. Brother Mo, it's better to be more like a commoner. That's why you're paying. Qin Mo held on to her hand. Lord Jiu. Bo Jiu didn't want to talk about how she felt when he called her that. She had to listen to him even if she had to hold back her tears. The room was indeed good, worthy of the exorbitant price. The floor-to-ceiling windows were pulled open, revealing the hot spring outside the balcony. It was still too early to soak in the hot spring. It was obvious that Qin Mo hadn't asked her to come up alone to soak in the hot spring. He unzipped his uniform, glancing up at the youngster, his handsome features distinct. Shall we have a 1v1? The Almighty wanted a 1v1. This was a rare opportunity. Bo Jiu sat with her legs crossed, a devilish smile on her face. Sure. A battle of wits and courage with the Almighty was a joy, be it in real life or in the game. Both of them were carrying notebooks. The desks in luxurious suites were usually big enough, not to mention that there was a dining table beside the hot spring. There was a bottle of red wine and a very beautiful plate of fruit on the table. In a hotel like this, the food and drinks were all the freshest. Even in the open air, there was not a single speck of dust. The weather outside was nice. The two of them put their laptops on the dining table and sat facing each other. They entered the game page at the same time. Bo Jiu smiled. She clicked on the mouse and selected the character. The 1v1 this time wasn't the same character as the one she had played before. Although he was also an assassin. But there were many types of assassins. This time, Bo Jiu chose the magic thorn, which didn't have the invisibility function. She had chosen this option because she knew that the invisibility ability was useless against the Almighty. That was because when she got close, the other party would be able to sense her. That way, she wouldn't be able to hunt him down. Once the invisibility function was broken, it meant that the game character would be half useless. Since that was the case, it was better to choose this, one-blade style. Qin Mo was indeed Qin Mo. After seeing her avatar, he didn't reveal any emotions. Instead, he lifted his thin lips into a faint smile. The music started playing. The two of them set off at the same time. Both of them didn't play the game according to the usual rules. Once they were out of the city walls, they disappeared from the game page. Bo Jiu knew that just because she couldn't see them didn't mean they didn't exist. According to the Almighty's style, he would definitely be slaughtering blue and red beasts in the bushes. Killing wild beasts to raise their finances was a must for assassins. Bo Jiu glanced at the small map. She carried her knife and swept across the bushes like a gust of wind. She was fast. In the blink of an eye, she disappeared again. It wasn't just her, Qin Mo was the same. This 1v1 could be said to be unprecedented. If it was uploaded online, it would definitely attract a lot of attention. Needless to say, there were actually some spectators. At the start, the youngster had entered by mistake. After all, there were people fighting in the PK arena and red was floating around. Of course, he had to enter to take a look. The moment he entered, he couldn't move. It wasn't because of anything else but the IDs of the two dueling players. Spade Z and Qin Mo. Was this real? That person didn't believe it at first and shared it with his good friend in the game. Take a look, is this real? The moment he shared it, there was an uproar. F***CK. Two professional Almighties. Aren't Spade Z and Almighty Qin a couple? Why is it a 1v1? My two husbands are PK because of me, who do you think I should marry? Upstairs. Wipe your sweat. Stop fooling around, give me the PK location, I want to watch too. Just like that, a large group of spectators flooded in. There weren't many players at this point and only a limited number of people knew about it. Hence, it was a large group of spectators. Compared to the time when Qin Mo and Bo Jiu were playing together, there were far fewer spectators. Wait a minute. Is Almighty Qin really fighting with Spade Z? Why aren't they on the map? Newcomer, I suggest you switch to Almighty Qin or Big Spade. With the guidance, they switched the crowd's view to Qin Mo's. In other words, whatever Qin Mo saw, they would see. Only then did they realize that it wasn't that the two of them didn't exist on the map, but that they were really moving too quickly. Every step they took was filled with bushes and there wasn't a single pause in between. Everywhere they went, monsters were killed. To reach such a level, they had to have a thorough understanding of the game map. If it were me, I wouldn't even know how to move in the wilderness and would often bump into walls. Bump into walls, cough, cough, I'm sure everyone has experienced it before. There's no need to explain, but Almighty Qin's maneuvering is indeed beautiful. How exactly did he do it? There aren't any traces on the map, it's almost as though he's hidden. Isn't it impossible just because of his fast hand speed? Other than his maneuvering, he has to be able to accurately understand every position on the map. How many times does he have to play hero to be able to do that? It has nothing to do with the number of times. I've been playing for so many years and I've never managed to come up with such a strategy. Brother, that's Almighty Qin. The words, "That's Almighty Qin," seemed to answer all their questions. He didn't even waste any time when killing monsters. His moves were used to pass through walls, and when he reached the middle lane, he didn't forget to destroy a wave of troops. Be honest, who do you think will win? It's definitely Almighty Qin, isn't that obvious? But as soon as he finished his sentence, a line of words appeared on the computer screen. The Tyrant King has been killed by Spade Z. Everyone who played hero knew that killing the Tyrant King would double the player's experience. F***ck, he killed the Tyrant King so early. When it comes to killing monsters in the wilderness, Big Spade is the best. He kills everything he sees. So what if we don't have blue and red beasts? We still have the Tyrant King. Wait a minute, what is Big Spade doing? Hiding in a deserted area. But was there really no one? A person suddenly appeared on the originally deserted map. It was Qin Mo. Everyone knew that the real experts would fight in the wild. Now Spade Z had decided to go against Qin Mo. Was he going to fight? But this time, they were wrong again. Spade Z didn't move. Instead, he hid in the bushes, as though he had disconnected. What's the meaning of this? What else could it be? He's going after the other big monster, the Tyrant King. Almighty Qin and Big Spade are passionate about killing in the wilderness. Otherwise, why would they wipe out the opponent's wilderness during the competition? If this goes on, will Almighty Qin be caught? From Qin Mo's angle, he couldn't see Spade Z, who was hiding in the bushes. Both of them had the same equipment. In order to kill the big boss, they would use lifesteal and meat equipment so that they wouldn't be killed by the boss. Because when the boss lost HP, the hero would heal. But even so, there was a risk of losing HP while hunting the big boss. According to the current pace. Once the Tyrant King and Qin Mo lost HP at the same time, Spade Z would jump out, killing two birds with one stone, killing both the Tyrant King and Qin Mo. Even if he couldn't kill two birds with one stone. At that time, Qin Mo would escape to avoid Spade Z's attack, giving up on hunting the Tyrant King. Naturally, the Tyrant King would fall into Spade Z's hands. I thought Spade Z and Almighty Qin would kill each other directly, but it seems like the better the player, the more they don't fight directly. Why? If they fight directly at the start, they won't be able to compete. Indeed, the reason why Hero of Legends was more interesting than other games was that it wasn't just a game where you cut me with your sword and I killed you with my sword. Instead, it required the player to think and set up a strategy. How to move, how to attack, when to advance, and when to retreat were very particular. On the screen, Qin Mo only had half HP left, and so did the big monster Tyrant King. Both of them were losing HP. Everyone held their breath, as if they had been waiting for this scene. Simply put, they were waiting for Spade Z to show his blade. Assassins all knew that the strongest move of an assassin was the big move. Whether the big move was used or not, it directly affected whether the person could be killed. It's coming. As soon as this sentence came out, the surrounding players all fell into a state of nervous breathing. They stared at the screen, their eyes lighting up. It wasn't because of anything else, it was because Spade Z, who was hiding in the bushes, had moved. On the other hand, Qin Mo didn't have much HP left and the Tyrant King was on the verge of collapse. This was the best time for all assassins to hunt. Bojiu narrowed her eyes, her slender fingers moving abruptly. Her movements seemed to be able to create a shadow. It was because of her fast hand speed that she was able to achieve such an effect. In the past, no matter how good people described Spade Z, they had never experienced it for themselves. But now, as they watched him rush out like a cheetah, they realized that other than Spade Z, no one else could attack with such speed. This time, Almighty Qin was probably going to be caught. But was that really the case? The moment Spade Z rushed over, Qin Mo leaped over the wall. It was as though Qin Mo had eyes in the back of his head, jumping over the wall. He missed. The surrounding crowd was so excited that they didn't care about the situation, grabbing onto the computer table, their entire bodies glued to the screen. F***CK. How did Almighty Qin do it? I'll give him full marks for that jump, no one would be able to catch him. But the problem is, Almighty Qin is too good at calculating, he didn't jump earlier or later, choosing this moment to let Spade Z tank the monster. Wait a minute, it's not over. Indeed, it wasn't over. The moment Bojiu entered the boss pit, she knew she had been tricked by the Almighty. With the Almighty's jump, all the aggro on the boss was directed towards her. Less than half of her HP was gone. But that wasn't the main point. The main point was the Almighty's big move, the 3000 knife cutting. That white slender figure that came and went without a trace flashed back again. A huge silver brilliance instantly filled the screen. It was so beautiful that it was a little ridiculous. If it had been anyone else, they would have died under such an attack. But Bojiu was Bojiu, even though she was trapped by the wall, she could still execute her most beautiful move. The weapons clashed, sparks flying. Her movements were unbelievably fast, and with the effect of her move, she managed to avoid the fatal 3000 knife cutting. The audience couldn't see how Spade Z moved, but it was that dazzling movement that gave off an extremely cool effect. They never knew that this game character could be played so beautifully. It felt as though they had been caught off guard. Nice dodge. Some people couldn't help but exclaim. He can escape. As long as he has HP, with Spade Z's hand speed, it won't be hard to escape. But Qin Mo's tactics weren't that simple. He knew that he didn't have any more moves and normal attacks wouldn't be able to deal with Spade Z. Hence, Qin Mo turned and attacked the boss, which had regained its full HP, before retreating swiftly. It can't be, he's still fighting at a time like this? Just as the audience was about to ask. On the other side, Spade Z, who had jumped out of the wall with low HP, was struck by the boss claws. He couldn't resist anymore, lying in the bushes. The audience was dumbfounded. They couldn't wait to start a video chat. So Almighty Qin's move was intentional, using the boss to kill. F***CK. This is the first time I've seen someone use such a tactic. Besides, Big Spade was the one who wanted to capture Almighty Qin, but why does it feel like he fell into Almighty Qin's trap? It wasn't a trap. Bojiu glanced at the hero lying on the ground, her silver hair moving. When she glanced up, there wasn't a hint of disappointment. Instead, when she glanced at Qin Mo, her eyes darkened. Qin Mo glanced at the youngster in front of him, meeting her gaze, his voice calm. Hero isn't just about hand speed. Bojiu's competitive spirit was ignited. Another round. Qin Mo didn't agree, instead, he stuffed a hand into his pocket and stood up, nonchalantly. Take off your clothes. Bojiu arched a brow in confusion. Qin Mo replied, it's time for the hot spring, besides, you lost. Bojiu. Chapter 892. Both of them were drenched from head to toe. Bojo could clearly feel the water dripping down the Almighty's black hair, landing on her collarbone. She wasn't sure if it was because of the high temperature, but it felt as though she was being burned. The panting was still ringing in her ears. It was because of this man's restraint that he was even more alluring. In the end, Chin Mo didn't do anything to her. Instead, he carried her into the bathroom. He turned on the shower, the cold water splashing onto her head. Bojo was instantly jolted awake. Her silver hair was still messy as she sneezed. She glanced at Chin Mo, the corners of her lips lifting as she broke into a devilish smile. It was rare to see the Almighty in such a pathetic state. Chin Mo arched a brow, pulling her back into his embrace. "Do you really want me to strip you?" "No, Brother Mo, the water is cold, isn't it inappropriate for me to accompany you?" Bojo replied, unable to conceal her obvious delight in his misfortune. Once again, Chin Mo doubted his own taste. Other than this guy's face, what else did he like about her? But even so, he still felt that the youngster who was secretly smiling was so cute that he wanted to hug her and rub her. Chin Mo really did that. "Why not? We can shower together. Don't worry, it will warm you up and not let you catch a cold." Chin Mo was always a man of his words. His left hand caressed the youngster's back. Bojo shivered, unable to escape. In the end, the two of them stayed in the bathroom for a long time. Anyway, Bojo had become obedient. Her handsome face was burning hot, her red ears trembling. The word F***ck carried a lot of meaning. She couldn't wear her previous clothes anymore. She wrapped a huge towel around her. On the other hand, the Almighty was still in his battle uniform because he had taken off his clothes. His body was upright, exuding an invincible elegance. Most importantly, he looked much more refreshed. Who exactly was the one suppressing who? Before she heard the Almighty say that they were going downstairs for dinner, she had been a little depressed. Then, the Almighty had ordered 30 small lobsters for her and asked if she wanted to eat them. The little gloom and whatnot disappeared like smoke in thin air. After all, the Almighty's little sweetheart was trying to please her, the overbearing CEO. She couldn't make things difficult for him. Eating lobster and drinking Budweiser was a must before the game. All the Supreme Alliance members were present for this meal. Everyone's gaze swept over the silver-haired youth, intentionally or unintentionally. Finally, it was Lin Feng's turn. With a glass of wine and a sentence, he said to the young man, "Brother, I admire you." It was a miracle that someone could survive after using force on the captain. Bojo bit the lobster pincer and clinked her glass with one hand. She glanced at Yun Hu's direction and said meaningfully, "You can do it too." Lin Feng, who understood the meaning, really wanted to curse out loud. This was probably how boys got along. It was impossible not to have alcohol, smoke, or dirty words. These were the men of the North. To express his feelings, he always hammered his shoulders with his fists. But at this moment, Bojo didn't forget to turn and ask the dazed Shui Yaoyao, "What's wrong?" Shui Yaoyao snapped back to her senses, her eyes bright. "Nothing, I just feel that this is good." Bojo laughed, taking the wine glass from her hands. "Girls shouldn't drink so much." Shui Yaoyao had something to ask. She wasn't sure if she was being too sensitive. She felt that Her Highness Jiao was acting differently recently. How should she put it? It seemed as though something had come to an end. Chapter 893. But speaking of which, after the National League. They were about to leave, right? Lin Feng was clearer about this than Shui Yaoyao. Some people weren't heartless or naive. But the people you cared about wanted to see you in this state. That way, he would be more at ease when he left. Lin Feng lifted his hand, downing another glass of wine. A foreign country wasn't that far away. It would only take a day's flight. Wasn't transportation so advanced now? But even such a consolation. It couldn't change the fact. His best brother was about to leave. Hence, he couldn't leave any regrets in the National League. Because of the competition tomorrow, they couldn't eat too late. Feng Yi had always been a smiling prince. He stood up in his suit, holding the wine glass in his hand. It's the semi-finals of the National League. After this match, we might meet with Xiangnan, our former opponent. They are now the ace of the esports industry. It is said that no one in China can defeat them. This time, it's time for Supreme Alliance to shine. Yunhu, 1v1, Spade Z, Qin Mo, 2v2. With that, he glanced at Qin Mo, smiling. You and Little Spade can coordinate beforehand. Qin Mo replied faintly. It was obvious that this arrangement was what he had in mind. I wish Supreme Alliance a victory. With that, Feng Yi tilted his head back and downed the wine in his glass. The duo he had high hopes for could finally shine in the esports arena. The trump card had to be left for the crucial moment. Because they knew that tomorrow's competition wasn't going to be easy. Rao Rong, that man, had supported the entire team. The night sky darkened. At the same time. In the same city. In a different hotel. After doing some research, Rao Rong was about to return to his room when he received a call. It wasn't anyone else, it was the fake Z that the crime squad had been chasing. The girl caressed the cat in her arms, sighing deeply. Rao Rong, it's hard for me to call you so late at night. But I have no choice, there's a change of plans, you have to lose tomorrow's competition. Lose? Rao Rong clenched his empty hand. Do you know what you're saying? Calm down. The girl frowned, not liking his way of expressing his emotions. The bet for this match is huge and many people have invested. Everyone has high hopes for your team. If you lose, our partner will earn quite a bit. Rao Rong, you don't have to react so strongly, you know better than me that things aren't as simple as they seem on the surface. There are benefits involved in esports as well. Isn't the reason why your previous club chased you away proof? Rao Rong tilted his head, his gaze sinking. I can't agree to this request, this is esports. Rao Rong. The girl rubbed her forehead as if she felt that this person was extremely stubborn and troublesome. Now that things have come to this, you should understand that whether or not your father's case will be overturned depends on whether or not you can satisfy your partner. You are already an adult, so I don't have to explain too much. Losing the competition is good for you. Rao Rong's eyes reddened. Are you threatening me? Just treat it as a threat. The girl glanced over at the platform she was paying attention to, her gaze venomous. Do whatever you want, it's just a suggestion. Before you make a decision, think about why you came back, don't mix things up. That way, your father's case can be reopened and I can help you gather more information. Or do you think you can avenge your father without us? Rao Rong, aren't you awake yet? The higher-ups don't have the time to bother with your father. So what if he was once a hero? It doesn't matter, it won't be easy to overturn the case. Every sentence was forcing Rao Rong to make a decision. Why did he come back? That year, his family broke up and he was chased out of the entertainment department. At his wit's end, he made a deal with the devil. He had a premonition but his desire for revenge was too strong. He wanted to overturn his father's case, to return all the humiliation he had suffered. Once he got to know the devil, he would fall into the abyss. In the dead of night, Rao Rong kept asking himself this question. The answer was inexplicable. In such a world, the shameless always had a better life than the shameless. Because they never felt guilty. When the pain was at its peak. Rao Rong would always smoke and this time was no exception. He locked himself in the bathroom, lit a cigarette, and leaned his head against the wall. He raised one hand and heavily punched the wall. He had to lose. It was his blood. He couldn't take revenge. He couldn't accept it. No one could understand how he had lived the past 2 years. The moment he closed his eyes, he would remember his father's face. His body slid down the wall, his bloodshot eyes gradually returning to a calm state. There were many ways to kill a person. To destroy his will. Rao Rong lowered his lids. When his black hair fell down, he typed 3 words. I will lose. He couldn't even type another word. In the end, he had let down his father's wishes, to be an upright person and play an exciting esports game. He couldn't do it anymore. Dreams weren't something that could be achieved with hard work. In the face of dirty reality, one could only lower their head. Rao Rong stood up, his back slightly damp as he walked into the night. He assumed it would be pitch black when he entered. But when he opened the door, he was surprised to find the desktop on. Someone was sprawled on the table, rubbing his eyes when he entered. He cursed. F***ck, Zhao Sanpang, you shameless bastard, you promised to train me so that I can face Supreme Alliance in a better state tomorrow. How dare you attack me when I'm asleep? You're asleep. If I don't attack you, who else would I attack? Besides, how many times have I told you to call me handsome? The earpiece was loud and the person's voice wasn't soft. The quarrel made Rao Rong pause. Lin Qintao turned his chair around, looking at him. Captain, where did you go? I've been waiting for you. Rao Rong reached out, tugging his collar. In the darkness, his expression couldn't be seen. Just taking a walk. You couldn't sleep either, right? Lin Qintao glanced up at the ceiling before shifting his gaze back. We're going up against Supreme Alliance tomorrow and I can't even keep my hands to myself. Captain, will we win? Rao Rong tightened his grip at the last sentence. In that moment, he didn't dare to meet the annoying person's eyes. Lin Qintao promised once again, I won't drag you down. Without any warning, when he turned his head, he saw that face. Rao Rong tilted his head, his voice shrouded in the night. It's late, sleep early. We'll talk about the competition tomorrow. Hearing this, Lin Qintao was a little disappointed, but after thinking about it carefully, he felt that the captain was right. I'm going to play one more round to consolidate my skills. Rao Rong didn't stop him, he didn't chase the annoying fellow out like before. At least for today. He wanted him to be alone with him. The familiar game sounds. The page of Hero entered. It was a game he had loved ever since he was a student. His father used to play with him, listening to the sounds. Rao Rong shut his eyes slowly. At the Hot Spring Hotel, the Supreme Alliance members weren't asleep yet. While the Almighty was on the phone, Feng Yi left the youngster behind with a sly smile. You don't have to worry, as the director of the Qin Group and your manager, I can handle such matters. You have to be careful, don't let the media catch you. You're still a boy, even if you're staying together, you have to be careful. Before you entered, we were playing. Bo Jiu leaned back, her arms slouching lazily. What you saw was just the wager after the 1v1. The corner of Feng Yi's mouth twitched in disbelief. 1v1. You and young Master Qin. Tomorrow's competition will make me realize my problem. The fastest way is to win against me. Bo Jiu stood up, stuffing a hand into her pocket as she sighed. But the wager is a little shameless. Feng Yi stilled. This was the first time he had seen someone who could understand that person's intentions so quickly and analyze it so clearly. What did you learn? Feng Yi chuckled. The youngster glanced over, the moonlight shining through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Her silver hair accentuated her handsome face. Hero isn't won by just having fast hands, it's just the basics. When you meet an expert who truly understands Hero, it's useless no matter how fast your hands are. In order to win, experience, strategy, and teamwork are required. Hero has never been a one-man game. Feng Yi stilled again. When had it been? That person had said it before. Hero had never been a one-man game. The current Spade Z made him feel at ease. If he were to fight against Rao Rong, regardless of how fast his hands were, he would still lose. Tomorrow's competition was destined to be a battle of skills. If he hadn't understood this point, he would have been worried Little Spade would lose. But from the looks of it, that person was more thorough than he had thought. In a 1v1 match, Neng Yin had easily solved all the problems he was facing. Feng Yi stood where he was, watching the youngster's back view as he left. He was still waiting for Qin Mo. Little Spade's side was fine. But he knew the condition of young Master Qin's hand better than anyone else. The attending doctor in America had told him. Young Master Qin hadn't fully recovered, only 70%. He might have been able to survive the previous competition because of Little Spade Z. He didn't have to use the true 3000 knife cutting. Chapter 894. If the 3000 knife cutting couldn't be used, Supreme Alliance might stop here. However, the reason why the 3000 knife cutting could be formed was because of the user's extremely fast hand speed and accurate positioning. In order to achieve the effect of killing someone without leaving a trace, the flexibility of the wrist was extremely high. How to quickly move the mouse, how to operate the up, down, left and right keys on the keyboard, where to place the left hand, how to coordinate the position of the right hand, and how to coordinate the position of the wrist would definitely cause a lot of pressure on the wrist muscles. Hence, Feng Yi wanted to know what young Master Qin was thinking. Regardless of whether he was a businessman or the director of the entertainment department, he wanted Supreme Alliance to win. But compared to winning, every member was more important, regardless of whether that person was young Master Qin or not. When Qin Mo saw Feng Yi, he knew why he was here. Don't tell anyone about my hand injury. Qin Mo's voice was calm. It won't affect tomorrow's competition. Feng Yi didn't speak at first, but after a second, he lit a cigarette. Then Little Spade will coordinate with you tomorrow. Feng Yi, there's something you're wrong about, Qin Mo interrupted. In the future, Little Spade will be the main player and I'll coordinate. Feng Yi stilled. His eyes seemed to have been heavily shaken. When he first saw Spade Z, he thought that there was finally someone who could keep up with young Master Qin's speed. If this youngster joined, young Master Qin's 3000 knife cutting would definitely return to its peak. But Feng Yi never expected young Master Qin to coordinate with him and let Little Spade be the main player from the start. Was he going to give up the leading position of the entire competition? How much trust did he have in him? Was that why? If Little Spade knew how confident you are in her, she would definitely be delighted. Feng Yi couldn't help but laugh. Little Spade doesn't seem to know the meaning of humility. That's why you don't have to tell her. Qin Mo stuffed a hand into his pocket, his deep gaze looking out at the night sky. Let's see how much she has grown in tomorrow's competition. Feng Yi understood what Qin Mo meant. If they couldn't even take down Rao Rong, then Supreme Alliance wouldn't have a chance of winning against Xiangnan. The night fell slowly. In the end, it was so thick that it was dyed red by the white of the east. National semi-finals. The media would always arrive earlier than the contestants. All the esports platforms had already stopped all the individual esports shows and emptied all the resources just for this live broadcast. At the same time, Hero became a game for everyone. Esports was also constantly developing. From not being forgiven in the beginning, it had now officially become a profession. Hot blood sprouted from youth. Anyone who had played the game would know. Sometimes, we can't let go of the game, not because of the game itself, but because of the people we meet in the game. Those who move us, accompany us to vent our emotions, and shout out the existence of the world that we yearn for the most. In the biggest square in the city center of H, a 20 square meter big screen was showing the game Hero. Everyone was looking up. Even those who haven't played the game before. They would also talk about it. That was why some people would say that 2017 was the era of esports all-stars. In the hall of 10,000 people. The lights were dazzling. The big screen slowly descended. Every one of them would present the most exciting moment of the game. Even the commentator was a big shot. The director had already picked up the communication device in his hand and brought it to his lips. Everyone, get ready. Action. Even though it was a live broadcast, there were people controlling the scene. The moment the director finished speaking, all the lights were turned on, shining on a woman in a pure white dress. She could be called the most beautiful MC in the esports industry. Handsome men and beautiful women, we meet again in the annual National League. A year has passed, but I haven't let go of Hero. What about you guys? The female MC's voice was loud and clear. The atmosphere in the hall was stirred up instantly. The female MC smiled. I heard that this year's competition is more exciting than the previous years. There are many reasons. Let me start with one, the number one newcomer in Hero, the FC King of Zone C. This was the introduction of the order of appearance. It was different from all the previous competitions. The moment the female MC finished speaking, the big screen immediately showed the scenes of the youngster playing the game. The way he moved the mouse, the way he smiled when his hands were fast, the way he was in a variety show, wearing a pure black uniform on his shoulders, the clothes fluttering in the wind, his eyes looking towards the camera, the handsome and arrogant self-introduction, just 5 words. I am Spade Z. When Bojio came out, almost all the other screens were recording the scenes of the youngster killing enemies in the game, from the first appearance of this ID in the game to the National League. Coming and going without a trace, one FC kill after another, as the number accumulated, converged into one word, KO. When they saw this scene, some fans even reached out to cover their mouths, their hearts beating along with the special effects of the game. That extremely short scene pulled them back into their memories. The first time they heard the name Spade Z. That person was still farming FC kills in the wilderness area. Now, he stood in the esports arena, his eyes were clear, his body tall and slender. He became the star that everyone paid attention to. Among them, the ones who felt the most were the Spade fans who stood behind the youngster from the beginning. They finally reached this step. In a month's time. It seemed like they had experienced too much. The scene of the youngster being splashed with coke was still vivid in their minds. The figure that stood in front of the computer after losing the game, and lowered his head for the first time, was still there. All of these difficulties were fixed in the final scene. The youngster's messy silver hair walked out from the entrance, his handsome and devilish side profile was the same as before. Every single one of them made their entrance in the same way. Even Shui Yao Yao. From the most ordinary to the most extraordinary. Now, Shui Yao Yao could finally look back unwaveringly after seeing those gazes. It was because she was wearing the uniform. All the team members were gathered. They lined up handsomely, exuding the aura of a king. Similarly, the opponent wasn't weak either. It was because of this level of strength that people were looking forward to seeing on the big screen. However, there were still places that the camera couldn't capture. For example, in the resting area before the start of the competition. It wasn't known if it was intentional, but when Li Nua tilted his head to take something, he bumped into Rao Rong's shoulder. There was a hint of disdain in his gaze. Captain, you aren't young anymore. The next time you stand in the formation, find your position, don't always try to stick your head out. Rao Rong didn't reply, his gaze darkening. What Li Nua hated the most was this person's gaze. He was just a poor man who had been chased away, but he really thought he was someone important. I'm thirsty too, buy me a bottle of water. You don't have to watch over the 1v1, I know how to fight. Li Nua's words were so harsh that the club manager was put in a difficult position. Asking an esports captain to buy water, this. But for the sake of the investment, the manager spoke up. Rao Rong, go ahead, we'll take care of the competition. Rao Rong lifted his lids, looking at the manager. That kind of gaze really made people uncomfortable, especially the manager, who understood everything in his heart. But so what? In the end, money was still the most important. The manager coughed pretentiously. This is the National League, Rao Rong, don't throw a tantrum. While he was saying these words, he didn't notice Rao Rong's clenched and relaxed fists. In the end, he seemed to have given up on something. His eyes turned deathly still. All right. It was Rao Rong's voice. It was a voice Lin Chintao had never heard before. His voice was hoarse and damp. The Rao Rong he knew. The Almighty who moved his mouse in high spirits. When had he ever been forced to such a state? Bang! The bottle of mineral water fell onto the ground. Lin Chintao bolted up from his chair, tugging Li Nua's collar. Don't you have hands? You don't even know how to grab water, young Master Li. Such a commotion naturally attracted the attention of everyone. Even the media started to pay attention to them. The club manager had to calm things down, lowering his voice. Chintao, it's a competition, what are you doing? What am I doing? Lin Chintao scoffed. Why don't you think about what you have done? The manager narrowed his eyes when he wasn't listening. What you are doing is putting the company in a difficult position. Are you still going to compete? Lin Chintao knew it was a threat. He clenched his fists, lowering them. In the end, Rao Rong held on to his wrists. He understood what his captain meant. But once he was forced to bear with it, he had to sacrifice his pride. He didn't have to bear with it. Wasn't esports all about winning? If power was involved, could it still be called esports? Lin Chintao released his grip. Just as the manager and Li Nua were about to reveal a smug expression, Lin Chintao spoke up again. Then let's not compete. I'm withdrawing from the team. Without a captain to direct us, there's no point in competing. I'm withdrawing too. One of the players stood up, his expression calm. I joined the club because Captain Rao is here. I'm withdrawing too. The third, fourth, and fifth, apart from Li Nua, the entire team felt the glint in their eyes. It made the club manager's heart skip a beat. Where was this? It was the National League semi-finals. Countless eyes were on them. Besides, hadn't they invested so much for this competition? They didn't want to compete just like that, they were making the club a scapegoat. If all of their team members quit during the National League semi-finals, the impact would be enough to destroy all of their business. The club manager had never expected Lin Chintao to be so daring. It wasn't just Lin Chintao, it was the same for the usually quiet team members. What exactly were they up to? How did the manager know? Rome wasn't built in a single day. This wasn't a young team. They had also walked through that difficult era until now. They watched as they destroyed the thing they cared about the most. They persuaded themselves to bear with it because of the competition and because they cared too much about their position. If Lin Chintao hadn't been the first to speak, they wouldn't have stood up. But human hearts were made of flesh. All they hoped for was a fair competition. It was easy for a single person to speak up. However, the voices of a group of people could blossom into flowers. In this world, one couldn't be arrogant after doing something wrong and hurting others. This was the esports arena. The place they loved the most. If this place wasn't clean anymore. Just as Lin Chintao had said, there was no point in competing. Every single one of them stood behind Rao Rong. Some of their actions were spontaneous. It wasn't possible for Supreme Alliance to not notice their actions. Bo Jiu arched a brow. Feng Shang didn't understand, stammering, "Oh idol, what are they doing?" "Nothing." Bo Jiu turned and patted Feng Shang's head. "We met a team that deserves a good fight." Feng Shang still didn't understand, but it didn't affect his excitement. It had been a long time since he was patted on the head by his idol. What should he do? Coco bit the rabbit's ear. He couldn't help rolling his eyes. He had never seen someone who blushed so easily. He didn't seem like Manager Feng's brother at all. But this time, the opposing team was about to change. They had indeed changed. It wasn't just these people. There was Rao Rong. A heart that had already died. Unknowingly, it started beating again. It was probably because of the figures standing behind him. Or perhaps it was because he was reminded of the days he had fought alongside them. Or perhaps it was because his father had told him to go and fight an intense esports match. Rao Rong glanced up, the phone in his pocket ringing. At this moment, it was obvious who it was. He didn't pick it up, allowing the ringing to continue until it stopped. The club manager gave in. He had no choice but to give in, he had to coax them into competing. Fine, as long as you're happy. Everyone, I was wrong, okay? This is a competition, not a game. Don't just casually say that you want to leave the team. How can you do that, right? The manager saw that the situation was not easy to clean up, so he tried to keep the peace. Rao Rong glanced over, speaking for the first time since he entered. Manager, you should know this is a competition, not a game. Qintao, go over and tell the committee that we want to change our 1v1 player and use the substitution opportunity. With that, Lin Qintao's eyes lit up. Li Nua started scolding. Rao Rong, UF*Ker, are you trying to take advantage of me? Do you know the consequences of not letting me have a 1v1? Regardless of the consequences. Rao Rong glanced at Li Nua. With your standard, you won't be able to win Supreme Alliance. Li Nua gritted his teeth. You. The manager was furious. Rao Rong, what right do you have to make such a decision? I'm the captain of this team, of course I have the right. Rao Rong's words stopped the manager's rage. The committee had already nodded in approval. Shortly after, the name list appeared on the screen. The atmosphere was stirring. Chapter 895. The real competition was about to begin. That was the thought in everyone's mind. The scene started. Yin Wuyao was still smoking, dressed in his black uniform. He took over Yun Hu's place and walked towards the 1v1 seats. The special effects started playing. The two players put on their headphones at the same time. The competition had officially begun. Everyone knew that this was a PK between the two players. The more skilled they were, the longer the battle would take. At this point, no one would say that Yin Wuyao was old and unsuitable for esports. The shoutcasters weren't as confident as when Supreme Alliance had just entered the scene. At this point, everyone finally admitted that Supreme Alliance wasn't weak. But that didn't mean that they would win. Because their opponents weren't simple. The first blood was taken by Lin Qintao's team. But very quickly, Yin Wuyao returned the favor. Every time the two players clashed, the audience couldn't help but take in a deep breath. This was a battle where either one of them would die. They were both considered to be older people in the esports arena. But their drive didn't diminish at all. If it was a newbie, he would have been killed by the uncle. Lin Feng loved to speak the truth. Now, it's time to see who has the more murderous spirit. The two shoutcasters agreed with Lin Feng. Veteran players have their advantages. They have more experience and are familiar with the map. But the downside is that they think too much. After dying once, no one will easily give up a second drop of HP. That's why both Yin Wuyao and the opposing team are holding back. It seems like whoever breaks through their limits has a higher chance of winning. That's right. However, a 1v1 is usually not a good match. No one is willing to go all out. After all, if they fail at the start, it will affect the rest of the battle. That's right, even I was most afraid of being drawn into a 1v1. I can't be reckless, I have to, it's here. The commentator suddenly interrupted his partner's words. He glanced over. Everyone's gaze was on the screen. The shoutcaster's eyes lit up. Snipe in the middle lane. Does Yin Wuyao want to start a fight in the middle lane? As soon as he finished speaking, the two figures clashed again. That kind of fast and beautiful operation presented a smooth scene that was addicting to the eyes. This was the kind of sparks that would only appear between two experts. If you think that heroes just stand there and attack, you are wrong. These two figures were entangled with each other, unleashing all their skills. How could they quickly avoid each other's attacks and then turn around to attack? During this period of time, the two figures didn't even stop, let alone stand. Every time one thought that one of them was about to die, that person's figure would sway, dodge the attack, and then turn around to attack. Both of them were at low HP, so both of them were wary of each other. They were afraid that they would be killed if they were careless. After all, no one wanted to lose a second life. With 3 lives lost, the competition would be over. Who wouldn't want to win? Hence, at this moment, the two of them simultaneously retreated back to the city to heal. The experienced commentator spoke again. If this stalemate isn't broken, the competition will drag on indefinitely. At this point, it all depends on who has more perseverance. That was indeed the case. The audience had never seen such a competition before. Too much time was wasted. 10 minutes followed by another 10 minutes. The 1v1 actually went on for almost an hour, but there wasn't a single sign of change. Another half an hour passed. Both Yin Wuyao and the opposing player held onto the mouse for more than a certain amount of time. Everyone knew that this couldn't go on. The club manager watched the scene. He was already unhappy with the sudden change of players, so when he saw the situation, he reached out his hand and used the one and only authority in the competition. As the supervising coach, he had the authority. But at this point in time, he shouldn't be interrupting the competition. The manager didn't think too much, he was only thinking about how to win. Hence, he didn't even care about Rao Rong's warning gaze. He picked up the microphone and hollered at the competing player, "Watch out, don't get killed again. If you can't win this competition, you will leave with your captain Rao." When Rao Rong pulled the manager's microphone over, he was already done. When the player heard him, he tightened his grip on the mouse, his gaze lowered. It was probably this kind of language that had provoked him. The audience could see that the character in the game was moving faster. At this moment, Supreme Alliance made a call. But this time, the person who gave Yin Wuyao advice wasn't Qin Mo, but Bojiu. As the vice-captain of Supreme Alliance, Bojiu had a head of messy silver hair, her thin lips lifted slightly as she said to Yin Wuyao, "Uncle, you don't have to think so much, there is no construction without destruction in esports." Hearing this, Yin Wuyao's fingers paused and he turned around abruptly. When the youngster had found him, her first sentence had been, "Why are you still playing games if you don't shake up the esports world?" Back then, he had come back because of this fearlessness. He had charged forward, not for fame, not for profit, and not even for victory, but to fight an exciting esports battle. Even if no one would remember his name after he lost. He couldn't retreat out of fear of losing. Yin Wuyao laughed. Previously, he had been sitting in front of the computer in fear of being affected, putting down his cigarette. But now, he held it between his thin lips, moving the mouse as he moved forward. That kind of attitude was the most carefree north of Yin Mountain. He thought that from that moment on, he knew very well why he had returned. It was because of the youngster's charisma. That youngster would never be inflexible. He wasn't young but had an astounding spirit. Even until today. The little captain he knew was still the little captain he had been in the past. He wasn't afraid of anything, he was still handsome. Without destruction, there was no construction. Little captain was right. Yin Wuyao's fingertips were typing furiously. The shoutcaster couldn't help but freeze when Yin Wuyao came face to face with his opponent once again. At this moment, with the previous performances, it wasn't expected to be so soon. But this time, it wasn't just a face-to-face, it was a direct confrontation. Whose positioning, whose attack was stronger, whose speed of retreat was faster would determine the outcome of this match. It was another battle between two experts. When both players' health was low, they had to retreat. Just as everyone was calculating who would be the fastest to return to the city, they saw Yin Wuyao turn to the side. Instead of retreating, he dashed towards his opponent. This action was unintentionally courting death. But was it really courting death? That was the greatest joy of hero. No matter what, one shouldn't expect the outcome. It wasn't just about positioning and hand speed, one had to know how to make use of the terrain. If one had all the conditions, then the most exciting thing was to kill with low HP. The audience watched as north of the Een Mountain swept past the side and hid in the bushes. He skillfully avoided his opponent's big move before going for another kill. KO. In an instant, the entire stadium erupted in cheers. The support batons were banged loudly. Second life. As long as he took down the opponent's third life, then the victory would belong to Supreme Alliance. No one understood why Een Wuyao's playing style was so different from before. But it was because of the bravery that could be described as flowing water. Soon, the opponent's last defense tower was reached. Een Wuyao took down the opponent's capital city. Game over. Supreme Alliance won. The cheers grew even louder. Even the shoutcaster hadn't expected the second half of the match to end so quickly. When he regained his senses, his first reaction was to ask the director to replay the match. Congratulations to Supreme Alliance, the shoutcaster said sincerely, his voice filled with disbelief. Lin Qintao couldn't understand why Een Wuyao's playing style had changed so suddenly. He was no longer carefree, as though he wasn't afraid of winning or losing. How did this happen? It would be a lie if he said he wasn't disappointed. But Rao Rong knew he couldn't let the results affect him. His voice was calm. The live conversation just now. The live conversation just now. Lin Qintao glanced over at Supreme Alliance, his eyes widening. Captain, do you mean that north of the Een Mountain changed so drastically because of what Spadesy said to him? Rao Rong remained silent, clearly a stranger. Lin Qintao grabbed his hair. F***CK, what exactly did Spadesy say to north of the Een Mountain? Why is he so stubborn? Bo Jiu didn't say much, just 4 words. Without destruction, there would be no construction. It was very suitable for Een Wuyao at this stage. And why did Een Wuyao dare to charge forward? It was because he knew even if he lost, his team members would also win it back. Because in a 2v2, the two people who were about to go on stage were the ones who could give people a sense of support. On the other hand, Lin Qintao's team wasn't in a good mood. Li Nua seized the opportunity, the disdain in his eyes obvious. You bragged so well just now, saying I wasn't suitable for a 1v1. In the end, you still lost. Just you wait, I will definitely tell my father about today's incident and say that you guys suppressed me. Up to you. At this moment, Lin Qintao didn't want to waste any more time with him, his face cold. After today, I won't be staying in this team anymore, the same goes for the others. Hence, you better behave, we don't have time for you. Lin Qintao was asking himself the same question in his mind. How strong was that youngster? They only knew that Spadesy was good at assassins and was adept at getting the first kill. But they never knew. Other than that, there were others. A call was enough to wake north of the Een Mountain up. Really, Lin Qintao couldn't describe it. He walked over and patted the shoulder of the player who had just finished the match. That player had been hanging his head ever since he left the arena, and this time was no exception. However, the strands of hair in front of his forehead fell down. That person's fingers moved, and the expression on his face couldn't be seen clearly. After playing in the Pro League for so long, some things have probably been implanted into my bones. For example, I'm very afraid of losing. Because of this fear, I don't even dare to do the bare minimum. I'm the one who didn't have enough courage. Rao Rong sat beside him. You played well, even though you lost. With that, the player's back trembled. Yes, no one could deny that it had been an exciting match. The time record had exceeded any other match since the start of the competition. If they weren't equally skilled, such a number wouldn't have been recorded. The applause from the crowd wasn't just for Een Wuyao, but for the player as well. Regardless of the team's atmosphere, the competition would still continue. The shoutcasters started to grab everyone's attention. What an exciting 1v1. Next up is the 2v2. Let's take a look at the players from both teams. Even though the list of participants had already been prepared, who would be competing in what, whether it would be a team battle or something like that, would only be announced before the match started. Even the commentator's name had to be displayed on the big screen. Alright, let's take a look. The players are Lin Chintao and Rao Rong. The shoutcaster's eyes widened when he saw the two names. Even he hadn't expected the two of them to be in the 2v2. Are they up to something? F***CK, are my eyes playing tricks on me? Almighty Lin and Almighty Rao are out now and they are even playing doubles. I want to know who Supreme Alliance is sending. It should be the Feng Yun duo, right? After all, they have high chemistry. Even though Shui Yao Yao and Feng Shang have good teamwork, they are nothing compared to Almighty Rao. I think it should be the Feng Yun duo too. After all, there are only 4 Supreme Alliance members who have played doubles before. The other 2 are newbies, so it isn't suitable today. The 2 names had appeared at an inappropriate time. The beautiful MC was shocked. She started to press the button on the screen on the left. After seeing the roster, I think everyone is most concerned about the same thing as me. Which 2 names are from Supreme Alliance? Let's take a look at the screen. The moment the MC finished her sentence, on the huge screen hanging in the air, 2 names froze with a swoosh. Spade Z, Qin Mo. Just 6 words, written in regular script. It was extremely domineering. All of a sudden, screams filled the air, almost lifting the roof of the entire venue. Spade Z and Qin Mo. Am I seeing things? They are actually on the doubles roster. Almighty Qin and Big Spade have never played doubles before. It's either a 1v1 or a team battle. Doubles? Gosh. I don't know why, but I'm looking forward to it. I feel like this is going to be a sweet competition. My heart aches for Almighty Lin for 3 seconds, F***CK, this is the first time. My Almighty Qin is playing doubles for the first time. In my life, I have never played doubles with anyone. This is my principle. Some people especially wanted to tell this girl that many of Almighty Qin's principles were no longer absolute after meeting Big Spade. This made Almighty Qin's entire being come alive. Doubles. What did that mean? You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.